From the moment you shift beneath the threadbare blanket, the awareness creeps in that this morning is unlike any other. Though the light that slants through the shutter gaps is the same hesitant pale it's always been. Your lungs fill with the damp hush of dawn, that deep inhalation of cold stone and chimney smudge that settles in your ribs like an unwanted guest. You push your shoulder against your sibling's restless form, hearing their soft grumble in sleep, a reminder that this is not just your life to bear. You have made a choice. No, not a choice, a sentence. And morning hasn't even offered its first yawn. You rise on crooked knees, joints creaking like salted hinges, and your feet meet the rough wooden plank floor, cold enough to snatch breath from your lungs. The room smells of stale wool, sour ale gone moldy at the rim, and something earthy you cannot quite name. Maybe goat fur, maybe the animal in the corner breathing too loudly in its sleep, its coat heavy with last night's damp straw. You pad toward the hearth, where embers still glow faintly under gray ashes, reluctant to die but not yet ready to live. You kneel, rumbling the coals with a stick, coaxing sparks like guilty confessions. Each tiny spark blossoms into flame, and for a heartbeat, you feel something close to warmth. But that warmth is thin, a candle's flicker compared to the furnace you'll wear today. You collect coals, bank the fire back against the morning chill, and the heat greets your fingers with sting, reminding you that life often arrives with small, sharp shocks. Beyond these walls, the village is waking. You can hear the distant cracks of shutters, the faint bray of animals beginning their day, the scrape of a pail against stone as someone fetches water. All of it is normal. All of it is routine. And all of it is about to be tinged with fear, or worse, indifference, because of what you have bound yourself to. You stand, wiping ash from your hands onto your coarse tunic, and feel the cool draft travel in, tracing the edges of your garment like a measuring stick. The house is poorly sealed. Gaps between planks big enough for a mouse, or perhaps something more sinister, to slip through. In summer, the gaps hum with flies. In winter, they howl with wind. Today, though, it is early spring, and the cold lingers like a stubborn shadow. You might be the only warm thing in this room, but soon you'll cover that warmth in layers of armor, layers that will trap heat, body odor, and dread in equal parts. You move to the corner where your gear awaits. Leather vambraces stiff with wax, a long woolen overcoat that smells faintly of tallow, and that mask, your cruelest adornment. You lift it, run a hand over the bird-like beak, smooth away the dust. You feel absurd, like an actor in a play no one rehearsed. Its leather eye holes stare back, vacant. You press it to your face for a moment, dragging your breath through the hollow beak, tasting the bits of dried lavender and rosemary that still cling to fabric. The herbs were meant to cure fear or mask death or something equally hopeful, but to your nose it smells of old spice jars and anxiety. You slide the mask into place, straps tight, and immediately everything changes. The world narrows to the air in your nostrils and the soft press of leather against your cheekbones. You breathe slower, more deliberately, tasting your own panic as you train your fingers to unlatch the small hooks at the throat. You close the hooks mechanically. The weight settles on your shoulders, loaded with intent and regret. You remember someone once called it prideful fashion, and you want to laugh, but laughter feels too alive for a cage so quiet. You look down at your hands, hands you have scrubbed raw in preparation, hands you will use to poke at plague victims today. They already feel wrong. From outside comes a soft clatter, your neighbor carrying coals, the same one who coughed last night through the wall, low and rattling, like stones tumbling in a jar. You take a breath. You are about to walk into every home that will open its door to you, and you will carry with you the exhale of that cough, like a passport, like a label, like a promise. You step outside the door, and the wind greets you, colder through the mask's vent than it was in the hut. You feel as though you've just waded into an ice bath. The path underfoot is muddy, churned by hooves and footfalls, slack and sucking at your boots. Each step requires intention, and each intention reminds you that you chose this. You trudge toward the square, hearing the muffled clang of the bell tower announcing the hour, a dismal reminder that time does not pause for dread. Villagers glance your way, some staring too long, others pretending they don't see you. Children hide, noses pressed into doorframes. The goat tethered near the well stares at you with unblinking black eyes, head tilting as if to say, "I don't know what that is, but I know it was your idea." You think of scratching its ears later, if you live. At the edge of the square, you pause, a ritual you have repeated every morning since taking on this path. You close your eyes, even if no one can see, and steel your shoulders. You imagine the plague itself as a dark wind, and you brace for its breath. You pretend that your beaked mask and stuffed herbs make you a bulwark, though deep down you know the truth. This outfit is less armor than stage costume, and your confidence is more fragile than a spider's web in a storm. A small rat scurries across the paving, ignoring you. It does not fear plague doctors. It knows something you do not. Life is not fair. It squeaks once, sharp and sudden, and disappears, tail twitching behind a barrel. You think of disease as a debt, and you realize this rat owes nothing. A part of you envies its simplicity. You inhale. The air is fragrant with wood smoke, sickle curved toward you from thatched cottages, mingling with the first tang of rotting leaves. The square is almost deserted, but soon it will fill with families who await your passage, who believe you are their line between life and everyday oblivion. You think of the faces you've already seen, the mother whose knuckles are white around her child's wrist, the old man who coughs into his sleeve while staring at you as though you know the answer. You do not. You are here because someone needed to do it, and that someone is you, because you married ritual to fear, and you've named it duty. Your stomach claws against your ribs, a hollow protest. You have eaten nothing but yesterday's scraps since yesterday's lunch, and the gray gruel that waits in the warming pot may be thick enough to stick to a spoon, may even stick to your hope if you let it. But business calls, and sympathy muffled like lint inside this beakless shell of leather. You brush ash from your cloak and step forward. With each footfall, you leave behind the comfortable expectation of a normal life, one where your hands were free of robes designed to trap both scent and shame, where your nights weren't punctuated by clattering shutters and coughing neighbors. You exchange all that for this, a path paved with other people's fear and your own private dread cushioned beneath layers of narrow cloth, wax, and leather. Your grip tightens around the haft of your stick, the ancient tool you'll use to poke, to prod, to examine. It is the only permit you have, the one granted in silence by every household door that opens to you. Come in, they might say. Come closer, your stick says back. It creaks in your hollow mask mouth whenever you adjust your breath. It is a companion now, simple, wooden, silent. It carries no glamour, no promise. The dawn sun begins to widen the shadows, elongating them across the square. You stand at the center, a statue of dread dressed in feathers and leather. The square tilts, unsettled. You tilt with it, and feel the familiar nudge of nausea gather behind your ribs. Not yet, you tell yourself. Not yet. Swallow. Ground your feet. Keep your composure. A raven cries somewhere off to the north, high above greasy rooftops. It is too early for scavengers to be out in force. This is still a village, not yet a graveyard. But the raven is here to remind you of the role you play. The messenger, the sentinel, the symbol, the one who carries away death, the one who is death-adjacent, storm-chosen. You take another breath. You will stumble through houses today and carry your own fear on every exhale. By nightfall, This weight may crush you or numb you. You might wonder whether you saved anyone, or if you're just the village's loud symbol of death. But not now. Now, you simply step forward onto that mud-slick path because your boots are on your feet and your mask is on your face, and something, whether hope or habit, moves you forward. You walk toward the first house, chest tight and lungs shallow, hoping the herbs in your beak do more than taste like ancient dust, hoping the leather between you and the world does more than trap your stench and your sweat. You hoist your chin slightly, though the mask muffles your sight, and you knock on the door with the tip of your stick. Even if no one greets you yet, the threshold is there. You are crossing into everyone's fear. You shift your weight, inhaling steam from your own breath. Tomorrow you will count lighter than hope feels, but today you are here. A small breeze picks up in the square, rattling shutters and tossing a few scraps of straw across your boots. You take it for a moment, a slow exhale across stone and straw and ash, as you prepare for what lies behind that door. The day is beginning. The morning air still hangs heavy with the chill you banked away at dawn, but now, as you stand at the threshold of the hut, the first breath you draw through your beaked mask returns warmth that feels sticky in the back of your throat, like some small betrayal. For a moment, everything slows. The distant tap of your sibling's wooden spoon on the lumpy porridge, the neighbor's cough vibrating through the thin wall, that familiar goat head tilt out in the yard. It coaxes from you a memory of what warmth is supposed to feel like. Pleasant, comforting, and you realize it's gone already, replaced by the knowledge you have to seal yourself in an outfit that will suck every bit of moisture from your skin, press against your lungs, bind around your body like a second skin you never asked for. You step forward. Your foot sinks into the soft mud at the threshold, and a loose tendon in your ankle reminds you how little this body was made for restraint. You adjust the hem of your woolen overcoat, its fabric rough and thick, the weave barely forgiving of the weight it's gathered. Ash, sweat from yesterday, unwiped skin. You close your eyes briefly, tracing with a fingertip the seam where someone stitched in a small patch of leather, hoping you'll be spared the abrasion there. You won't be. Nothing is spared. You reach down and pull open the wooden chest in the corner, its lid creaking like an old hinge, reminding you of the hinge of your spine when the coat settles on your shoulders. Inside lie your clothes for this ordeal. White linen shirt, stiff with starch and starch-like regret. Heavy woolen breeches that come up high enough to tuck under the coat, but not high enough to hide the heat. Leather gloves still creased from the last wearer's palm. A maiden aunt, perhaps, who wore them to sew until the stitches gave out. And the leather top hat style hood ringed with brim to catch dripping hazards without world's etiquette. You take the shirt first. You pull it on, tugging at sleeves that ride up your wrists, fabric clinging to damp skin as it slips over the collar. Already your chest tightens, your heartbeat picks up pace, not with fear, but with the simple exertion of covering your skin. You snake a finger around the neckline to check if the mask will sit smoothly later, but for now, you're just layering misery. You reach for the breeches next. You half laugh at the irony. Breeches designed to give you freedom of movement, yet so confining you'll spend most of the day walking as though wading in syrup. You shimmy them on, adjusting each leg, making sure the waistband sits just so, tight enough to hold, loose enough to breathe, but always just tight enough to remind you that you are wearing a costume of survival. You stand, legs feeling spongy. You exhale slowly, tasting the linen, the wool's dust, and something older, leather that has never forgotten the smell of death it once carried. You close your eyes and imagine a simpler garment, a cotton shirt, like one you might have worn as a laborer, something soft, but you put the thought away quickly. This outfit is ritual, an identity you don't want, even as you crumple into it. You squat then, reaching into the chest again for the gloves. They're stiff, so you warm each one between your hands until the leather softens and forms to your fingers. You breathe out through your nose, and the scent of tallow and wax floods you. In the old days, the village leatherworker made these gloves. His hands are long cold now. His daughter still springs through your yard in springtime, hair catching sunlight, and you remember what she looked like before you pulled on these gloves. You shake off the memory and pull them on, feeling them lock into place, strapped around your wrists as though to warn you that nothing should be touched without thought. You rise and reach for the woolen overcoat. You slip your arms into the sleeves and button the front with wooden toggles that press into your chest. You pause, hands flattening the coat against your body, realizing you carry another burden under this cloth. It's your heartbeat, amplified, your breath in and out like a bellows. The garment is hot even now, before the sun fully claims the sky. You adjust the collar to sit open just enough that you can breathe without choking, but soon you'll seal it up. Don't need the breeze, they say. Won't do you any favors. You lean your forehead forward, close your eyes to the weight, and the world blinks into slow motion. Outside, the day has brushed its fingers across the yard. The goat is staring again, the sun catching in the small curls of its fur. It looks at you as though you've always belonged beside it, head to head. You imagine your reflection in its eyes, dark eyes behind that leather beak, coat billowing with sweat. You open your eyes and the goat turns away, uninterested. You realize that even the animal doesn't envy you. You blink, the slits in your hood narrowing the field of vision until you begin to forget what real sight feels like. You rotate your wrists, trying to remember the movements the gloved hands are supposed to do, carrying the witnessed sick, brushing aside the living, touching the dead only with the stick, not with the fingers. Practical in design, yes, but designed without comfort, nursed into the shape. You press a glove into the other, and your fingertips moan with hot pressure, like they've learned to speak in a language of suffocation. Your lungs begin to fill with fabric. You draw a slow breath, test the elasticity of your chest through 4 layers of cloth. You taste wool, you taste leather, and you taste sweat too, your own. You exhale, tasting bitterness. You realize the mask, the coat, the gloves, they aren't accessories. They are your coffin, slow and hot. The wood smoke drifting from neighboring chimneys drifts through cracks overhead. You close your eyes and imagine breathing in cold, fresh air instead. Something bright, clean, free. Instead, air comes in filtered, musky, recycled. The humidity collects in the coat's collar. It trickles down your spine. Your every movement is sticky, and you can't remove any of it. Not here, not now. Your goat watches as you turn finally to the chest once more for the mask. You lift it, and the beak feels lighter in your hands than the coat did, if only because you still haven't worn it. You hold it out before you, the leather underbrim catching sun. You can see, in a small dust ring left on the wood lid, the outline of your own mouth and nose. You imagine your breath passing through those few holes like a ghost whisper. Are you still you in there? You fit your fingers under the straps and feel around the rim, making sure nothing has torn. You press the mask to your face briefly, just lips, nostrils, breathing in the stale scent that collects inside, evidence of yesterday's morbid business. It's hot already, stale stunning. You lift it then and hook the straps around your head. You adjust until the mask is snug. Your jaw muscles protest. You blink twice. Exhale. You breathe. You face yourself looking out at the yard from inside the mask, and you wonder which part of your mind you have to surrender to make this bearable. And then, click. You close the straps behind your head. You shift backward, pressing your entire spine against the flap of the hood, and your world becomes immediate. The beak extends before you. You lift the coat's collar to meet it. You can feel the air you draw being pulled through the hollow leather. Already, the veneer of ceremony falls away, and you are breathing your own suffocating heat. You feel veins pulse in your throat. You imagine that inside this hot air, microbes dance. Whether plague or famine spawned, you don't know. But you feel them cling, hot as sweat. For a moment you pause, and you realize you cannot see your own chest. You can see only the beak pointed forward, a wooden stick, the goat, the mud. And you think, you wear this because you believe that clothing would separate you from death. You feel the betrayal in that thought. What good is clothing if it binds life so tight you can't feel it? You unbutton the coat for a breath of relief, then button it again. You slide leather gloves over your fingers, strap them tight. You feel around your neck to adjust the fit, trying to chase away the feeling that it's strangling you. You swallow, like swallowing wet leather. You can hear again beyond the walls now, someone stirring porridge at a neighboring home, someone moving a stool, someone coughing. You taste that in the air too. Sour oats, tobacco, damp straw. You realize each breath is an inventory of discomfort. You step outside again, even if you were already outside. The yard hums with early morning chores. The goat bleats softly, flicking its tail at a fly. You falter, as though you might slip into the grass, but you press forward. Boots clump onto packed earth that is damp but forgiving. Every step sends a shiver up your spine. Heat trapped by the coat meets cold ground. You feel both at once, like someone kneading cold dough with hot hands. You walk toward the well now, open in the center of the yard. You lower the bucket, and your fingers inside the gloves sink into cold water. You jerk them out. The contrast is shocking. Cold metal, cold water, searing glove. You wrap your arms around the bucket, heft it up, and feel the weight shift. Cold water runs into straw-strewn wood. Your back stiffens. You stand there holding the bucket, coat still commanding the heat from your chest, and you think something wry. You might have lasted longer in some other ill-chosen dress, perhaps as a scribe in the cool shadows of parchment and ink, perhaps as a baker, kneading in the sharp spring sunlight. But you chose this coat. You chose this chest armor of cotton, wool, leather, carefully assembled to keep everything, death, disease, you, together. You exhale through the mask and taste your own mortality in that breath. The bucket settles to the ground. Your coat gathers more moisture. You can feel it seeping from the wrists down the arms, pooling at the hem. You tug at the edges, try to displace the fabric, but everything stays where it is. Your coffin is full of sweat. You are dead weight in this ritual cum sacrifice. You pause. The goat is still watching. You realize it expects nothing from you. It just is. You envy that. You take a slow breath. You close your eyes and try to feel the cold once more. Instead, you feel heat rolling off your body in waves. Your back flushes with it, pressurized. You straighten, tug hoodie forward to catch the breeze, if breeze will come. It does not. Only wind, shifting hay in the loft, stirring embers in the hearth somewhere inside. You taste ash-laced air. You taste sweat so thoroughly you can't place where your own body ends and the outfit begins. You turn away from the yard and edge toward the gate, where the road calls today's obligation. You sway slightly, reminding yourself, this is just the beginning. You have only begun to sweat. You have only begun to question whether you can hold on. And beneath it all, that quiet voice reminding you that soon you'll carry tired villagers again. But first, you carry yourself inside this hot, sweaty coffin. Hold your breath. Pull the straps tight. The road will meet you soon. Your coat glistens with sweat in the dawn light, each drop a reminder that this is only the start of your burden. Sweat, regret, uncertainty. In that shimmering hush, you step forward toward a day that is already too heavy, and you wonder how many breaths you'll survive inside this shell before it breaks you. Tomorrow. The sun isn't the only thing that will cook you alive. The dawn light is already thick with the weight of yesterday's sweat, lingering like a scent that you cannot wash away. And the first brush of morning finds you shifting the straps of your leather beak, trying to settle it just so before you step outside again. You've adjusted it a dozen times since you strapped it on, curling your fingers around dried leather and brass rivets, each tiny groove worn smooth by regret, by preparation, by the continuous friction of breath through old herbs and spices. You inhale, and for a moment the scent of wormwood and clove erupts, pushing back memory of damp wool, ash, sour porridge. You try to let the fragrance steady you, but in the back of your throat there is a quiet echo of the goat's judgment from the yard as you pass through, reminding you that this tool is not just a mask, it's the reminder of your decision. You run a gloved hand along the curve of the beak without removing it, feeling the subtle jag of a crack you've been ignoring. You press your palm against the leather and imagine that fissure widening just enough to let one cough in unfiltered. You inhale again and taste the stiff, dried leaves inside. Mint that smells like old lice. Lavender that reminds you of funerals no one sobbed at. Laurel that tastes like a sigh of someone who has already given up. You let it all swirl together in your mouth, a bitter, dusty stew, and as you exhale, you wonder whether this concoction is helping you or simply filling the space where fresh air never quite reaches. You shift your weight, feeling the uneven ground beneath your boots, one sole smoother than the other where you step more often. The feeling of regret and herbs pressing into your senses makes your legs tremble slightly, though you can't be sure whether it's hunger, the heat trapped by layers of wool and leather, or the weight of the smell suffocating your mind. You try to widen your stance, pressing each foot deeper into the soft mud, seeking stability. The straps of the mask bite into the back of your head. Your ears hum, and you press your gloved fingers against the welt the straps have created, as if hoping you can massage away the pressure. Morning chores have begun even before the sun is fully awake, and the world beyond the gate is already alive with creaks and shuffles. You can hear the neighbor's daughter carrying water in buckets, her wooden yoke tapping on her shoulders, a rhythm that reminds you of slow rain. Somewhere a fire crackles and hisses, the fuel of last night's hearth sputtering out in metallic whispers. You breathe in through the beak again, tasting hot straw and wet smoke. Your lungs tighten. You close your eyes briefly, tilting your head back to hold the weight of the mask, to feel if maybe, just maybe, it will loosen enough to let in something cleaner than despair. But it does not. Instead, your cheek grazes metal mesh that protects your eyes. You press your palm to the mesh and feel the sharp ridges where the wire bends. You inhale again and feel the herbs scrape your throat, dry and sharp. You imagine them scratching and realize regret has a texture too. It is the rasp of old wood in your throat when you swallow, the stiffness of leather around your jaw, the grind of every breath through those dried leaves that smell of death and false salvation. Your steps carry you toward the gateway, where light cuts narrow blades into the sodden ground, where dew clings to strap buckles and bead of moisture glistens on the tip of the beak before falling. You follow the path of dew, clench your jaw to keep from tasting the water rolling down the outside of the mask. You don't want to swallow another flavor tonight. You just want to breathe. You underline every breath with what you're carrying. Not just herbs, not just the mask, but the echo of yesterday's regret, a memory you can't silence of a villager's cough that lasted hours, longer than your herbs could hide. You recall pressing the stick against their back, measuring distance, warming hands and gloves that still smell faintly of onions you passed in the pantry. You shifted the mask and inhaled the sick room's breath. You tasted it then, and you taste it now. You shift into the yard proper. Boots flatten mud into your soles, and the goat looks up again and flicks its head. You feel it in your mask, the movement, an accusation or indifference, same difference. The herbs inside your beak shift as you turn. You swallow, taste the powdered mint sliding down, and you imagine it attempting to purify the rancid air, as though peppering poison won't preserve you. You inhale sharply, and the leather creaks. You press your hand to your chest beneath coat and shirt and feel your heartbeat trying to slow down, trying to hide. You touch the base of the beak. There, a small gap between leather edges. A fraction of air, unfiltered, seeps in, and the herbs taste soiled. You tighten the straps again. You run your fingers from the top of the mask to the end of the beak, tracking the line of mortar sewn there. You think, this beak is an act of faith that scent could shield you from rot. It is faith in false things. The mask belongs to a tradition of protection, of the ritual that will make encounters less intimate, of the belief that the smell of spice will keep away the sight and smell and touch of illness. But you already know something else. The herbs are there to soothe your memory, not necessarily to save your lungs. You inhale again. Clove, wormwood, mint, lavender. You taste them all and vomit is at the back of your throat. But you swallow, because pulling off the mask seems unimaginable now that you're wearing it. This mask is your uniform, your identity. They will know you by it. You imagine villagers drawing back at sight of you in your beaked silhouette, eyes hollow in mesh eyes, mask billowing in a psychotic puff of morning chill. You want them to recoil. You want them to know you're here to protect them, but more importantly, to protect yourself from reality, from breathing what they are breathing. Yet you wonder, does it shield you, or does it lock you into this? You walk along the path toward the shed where you keep the herbs. There's straw at the threshold, not enough to fill the room, but enough to soft cushion the cold stone. You brush your hand over the shelf that holds jars of dusty leaves. You inhale again and realize your breath is trapped in between cloves and lavender. You consider coughing, but the gloves and mask conspire to muffle everything. When you do cough, long, empty, echoing, it rattles inside your chest like buried wood burning. You hold your chest, heart pounding, and you consider that perhaps your heart itself might suffocate before your lungs. You bring a jar off the shelf. It's labeled in faded ink, wormwood. You unscrew the lid carefully, feeling tension in the threads. The jar gives with a hiss, sound of air escaping, and you inhale the cloud of spores that swirl out. They fill the air in front of you like a streamer of dust. It settles around you. You cough again. You let the glove press over your mouth, somewhat useless, but necessary. You press the jar to your chest to steady the jar and your heart. You close your eyes under the mesh. You taste wormwood, bitter as yesterday's sour bread. You swallow again. You measure a pinch, roll it between fingers, ungloved, for feel. Dust smears your skin. You press it between folded linen and leather, where the weight is less noticeable. You tuck the herbs in. You redraw breath through the beak and think, this will be enough for half a day. Tomorrow you'll add more. Regret is a spice too. It never runs out, no matter how much you hoard. You head back outside, stepping past the shed threshold into morning air, crisp enough to make the beak fog on its edges. You feel the dew soaking the hem of the coat, heavier by the minute. Each step pulls dirt onto your boots, forming a thin crust that will cling to you throughout the day. The leather beak feels cooler now, but not cold. Cooler is not the same as comfortable. You shift your shoulders, tiny adjustments, trying to redistribute the weight of regret and herbs. You glance at the goat, grazing at the yard's edge, chewing slowly. You might imagine it judgmental again, but you refuse. You're not equipped for criticism. You're stretched between the weight of your tools and the breath they claim in exchange. You inhale, feeling the beak warm in the center of your face. You taste clove faintly now, smudged by sweat. You remember earlier, scraping hoe across cobblestone, your palm feeling the echo in your wrist. Your gloves press deep graft in your skin. Trade is simple. You give your body to the job. The job gives you a layer to hide in. But it's a layer you breathe through. You smile inwardly at the thought. Dry humor among damp regret is still humor. You step forward, balancing awareness of the herbs inside with awareness of the heat still building beneath your layers. As you approach the gate once more, the path begins to slope downward toward the village road. You hear footsteps, others venturing out. You feel a ripple in your stomach, the first pang of hunger. You intended to eat before you set out, but the herbs and mask and regret conspired to delay you. Now hunger joins the chorus in your chest. You rise onto the balls of your feet, trying not to slip. The beak's tip points at the horizon, and the herbs inside shift again. You taste clove, wormwood, mint, regret, bitter company. You step out past the gate, beyond the goats grazing, into light that feels intermittent, bright in patches, dim in others. You blink your eyes, trying to adjust to the wire mesh. The sunlight bleeds into tiny prisms across the beak's surface. You swallow and taste mint. You step forward onto the road itself, packed dirt, trodden by hooves and feet, now slick with dew. You imagine the beak tracing every groove in the stone as you walk. You imagine regaining something of yourself if you toss it away. But you keep moving. You taste clove, steeped in morning chill. You have herbs to carry, regret to sip, mortality rising with each breath through the beak. You've made a choice, and though your body protests, you inherit the ritual you followed. Your stride lengthens as the path flattens. The village wakes in hush and creaks, and early doors opening. Their breath and sputter and cough raise in greeting. You breathe through herbs and regret. You advance toward them. Heat rises slowly in your chest. You taste lavender now, faint, fading under dominance of your sweat-soaked wool. You lean forward slightly, adjusting. The beak droops, a consequence of tiny misfit. You wet your lips beneath the mask and taste cotton. You swallow. You swallow again. You pull in another breath of herbs and regret. You step again. Your beak drills forward across bricked path between two rows of shuttered houses into a morning already too heavy for the comfort you don't have. You carry regret in your breath, herbs in your beak, and the road unwinds in front of you, quiet, demanding, unending. Ahead, confrontation with sickness waits. But first, you carry the taste of your own choice in every exhale. The smell of the herbs never really leaves you. Even now, as the mask hangs limp beside your palate, and the stench of lavender, mint, and crushed something or other still clings to your inner nose like a memory you didn't choose, your stomach growls with a kind of hollowed-out defiance. You don't remember being full. You just remember being less hungry than now. Your hands are stiff, and so is your spine. The night was long, the air colder than you'd expected, and your dreams involved too many goats and not enough fire. At some point, someone coughed nearby, dry, rattling, the sort that might have once meant nothing, but now makes your entire chest tense like you're preparing to flee a ghost you can't see. You stretch as little as the draft will allow. The ceiling is low enough that sitting upright is more an act of will than geometry. The thatch above is uneven, like the skull of someone who's been struck too many times with bad luck. Something scurries along a beam overhead, but you've made peace with that particular mouse. He doesn't ask questions and doesn't share your food. Beside you, the blanket that barely earns the name still holds the heat of your breath, damp and sour. The wool shirt beneath your robe is doing its best impersonation of armor. It smells like sleep and old smoke and the persistent bitterness of worn fabric that's been washed in disappointment more than water. Eventually, you commit to movement, not because you want to, but because your back has made threats your pride can't ignore. The floor is colder than the rest of the world. Your toes find the worst of it. Something crusted from yesterday's boots sticks to your heel as you stumble forward, careful not to jostle the hanging tools or the small tin cup you forgot to clean. The fire from the night has died. Of course it has. It always dies. It's dependable in that way, like the tax collector or your uncle's smell. There's a gray sorrow in the hearth, an ashen apology where heat should be. You nudge at it with a stick you didn't know you were holding, then blow on the embers like they owe you rent. They glow faintly, reluctantly, like a promise that was made too late. Your breakfast is waiting. Not that it's been prepared. Not that anyone thought about you while you slept. No, it's just there, in the pot, which is not clean, and next to the bowl, which is also not clean. The gruel has achieved a texture somewhere between clay and complaint. You poke it. It pokes back. Still, this is the ritual. You scrape it into your bowl, a sound like someone slowly giving up, and carry it to the one stool that doesn't wobble like a drunk monk. The spoon you use is the one you like slightly more than the others, because it doesn't taste aggressively of wood. It tastes like neutral sadness. You can work with that. Across from you, a familiar presence has also committed to breakfast. She does not speak. She does not smile. She stirs the same kind of gruel with the same kind of indifference, her hair tied back in a way that suggests she was angry when she did it. You nod in that way that people do when they'd rather not make noise. She nods back, as if nodding is the least she can offer, and still perhaps too much. There's a long silence, not a peaceful one, not the silence of reflection or comfort. This is the silence of people who know too much about each other's breath. You chew. She chews. The room creaks in places you're too tired to name. The gruel is cold. Not refrigerator cold, obviously. That kind of cold would feel exotic, maybe even luxurious. No, this is the damp corner of a cellar cold. The cold that grows things. The kind that makes you wonder whether this was meant to be eaten hot, or if warmth is just something you remember from better days. You consider adding a pinch of salt from the small crock near the window, but you also consider that the salt might be older than you, and might taste like everything it's absorbed from the air, including your neighbor's feet and the sad air of funerals. You eat it plain. You tell yourself it's for health. The conversation remains absent, not dead, just uninvited. Words hang near the rafters but refuse to descend. There's nothing to say that wouldn't sound like complaint, and even complaints require a kind of effort neither of you have stored up. So you spoon in silence, one tepid bite at a time, imagining the warmth that might have once lived inside this meal like a ghost you can't summon. A fly lands on the rim of your bowl. It sits there, entirely without shame, and you watch it as if you might remember what it feels like to be that bold. You wave it off lazily, knowing it will return. It always does. Much like the aches in your knees, or the soft, suspicious bubbling sound the pot makes when it thinks no one is listening. The morning moves in crooked lines, not a graceful unfolding of light, but a reluctant seep, like tea spilled into a dirty rag. The sunlight, such as it is, slants through the warbled window pane, hitting the floor with all the cheer of a tax ledger. Dust dances in the air, too slow to be dramatic, too persistent to ignore. It sticks to your sleeves, your hair, the inside of your throat. You chew through it. There are sounds outside, muffled and dull. A cartwheel that whines like a guilty conscience. A chicken that's either triumphant or terrified. It's difficult to tell. Someone coughs nearby, a child by the sound of it. That sharp, sudden kind of cough that grabs your attention even when you pretend it doesn't. You pause, spoon midair, and pretend to examine the state of your boot, as if it were urgent, as if it were noble. The woman across from you finally sighs. Not a full one, not the kind meant to be heard. It leaks out, like heat from a cracked oven. You glance up. Her bowl is empty. She's been scraping it for longer than necessary, but not out of hunger, just out of the same stubbornness that keeps you both alive, barely. You nod again. She does not return at this time. The wind whistles through a gap near the window, and for a moment, it sounds like the world is laughing at you. You pull your robe tighter, as if the wool hasn't already lost its argument with the damp. Your bones feel like a house that's been left too long in the rain. The stool creaks when you shift. It always does, and it always sounds like judgment. You wonder, not for the first time, if meals have always felt this quiet, this obligatory. You can't remember a breakfast that started with joy or ended with comfort. Just ones that began with necessity and ended with the scraping of spoons and the knowledge that the rest of the day would not be better than the start. Behind you, the wall groans. Not loudly, just a soft complaint, as though even the beams are tired of standing up. You think of the herbs you must repack into your mask later, the way they crumble, brittle and stubborn, the way their scent clings to your fingers no matter how hard you scrub. It will follow you through the day, competing with the odors of things that should never have had smells. You set your spoon down. It clinks against the bowl with a finality that feels too grand for what little you've eaten. Across the table, she stands. Her chair doesn't creak. It only whispers as it slides back. She doesn't look at you as she moves to the fireless hearth, but she brushes past your shoulder just closely enough to remind you that other people still exist. Her footsteps fade. You are left with your own breath and the scent of cold grain and bitter regret. Your stomach is no longer growling, but it is not full either, just resigned. You think about chewing on one of the herbs from your pouch, but they're meant to ward off pestilence, not despair. Besides, they taste like crushed optimism and ash. The bowl stays on the table as you rise. You'll clean it later, or someone will, or it won't matter. Everything tastes the same after enough days. Everything starts to blur. The faces, the footsteps, the gruel. It's all a loop. A damp, gray, oat-flavored loop. You move to the window and glance out. Mist clings to the rooftops like old gossip, and nothing looks alive. You see a crow picking at something in the road. It wins the argument with a rat and flaps away, victorious in its small misery. Somewhere in the distance, bells toll, not in celebration. Never in celebration. You exhale through your nose. It fogs the glass for a moment, a small warmth that fades quickly, like a memory of something you can't name. You gather your things, your boots, which are still wet from 3 days ago, your gloves, which were never truly dry to begin with, the bundle of fabric you call a satchel, though it has more holes than purpose, and the mask. It waits for you on its peg, crooked and patient, the beak stuffed with the remnants of things meant to help, meant to protect, meant to lie. You'll wear it again soon. You always do. But not before you step out the door and brace yourself against the chill, the weight, the knowledge that this is the easiest part of your day. And yet, it lingers with you. That taste, that silence, that bowl of gray, that breakfast no one really wants, shared with someone who no longer tries to pretend otherwise. The door shuts behind you with the softness of resignation, and already the outside air clings to your mask like damp sorrow. The morning has sharpened its edges, not with light, but with odor, a smell that cannot be named exactly, only endured, something between old cabbage, wet wool, and the end of all things. You adjust your mask, not because it helps, but because it gives your hands something to do besides tremble. The street outside your dwelling, if it still deserves such a title, does not wait politely for your senses to adjust. It crashes over you immediately. The cobblestones beneath your boots, slick with untrustworthy moisture, are uneven and vaguely malicious. Every step is a negotiation, between slippery and sharp, between what you hope is water and what your instincts tell you isn't. Your foot slides just slightly, and you wonder if dignity is overrated. There's a squelch to the mud that doesn't belong in any natural world. It sucks at your soles like something jealous. You look down and realize the color beneath your feet is not of earth, but of stain. Layers upon layers of history pressed into a slurry. Ash, old blood, refuse, bits of last week, possibly someone's toe. Every building leans slightly, as if they too are trying to avoid what's below. Wooden beams sag like ribs, walls bow inward or out, none of it consistent or comfortable. You pass a shutter that's been nailed closed for so long it started to fuse with the wall. No one lives there anymore. Or if they do, they're quiet about it. The kind of quiet that grows moss. Your staff taps gently as you walk. Not out of authority, but necessity. You poke the ground ahead, prod corners before rounding them. You do not trust these alleys. They are full of sighs and puddles that breathe. Somewhere behind you, a window opens with the same energy as a confession. Something is thrown. You do not turn. It lands with a wet sound, a thud that ripples into silence. The smell arrives next, curling around you like a question you didn't want to answer. You keep walking. A dog watches you. Or at least, you think it's a dog. It might have once been one. Its ribs are more suggestion than substance. Its eyes like two small, accusing coins. It doesn't bark. It just observes. You nod, because it feels polite. The road curves sharply at the corner where the baker used to sing. He no longer does. His window is shuttered now, the boards across it uneven, hurried, like someone gave up halfway through being afraid. Outside the door, someone has left a pair of shoes. Small ones, facing the wrong way. You move on. The next stretch of road is crueler, narrower, a place where walls weep condensation down into your path, and the air feels like the inside of someone else's breath. You hold the scented herbs closer to your nose. They smell like old hope. Fennel, rosemary, desperation. And still the city keeps going. Bodies appear the way potholes do, gradually. Then all at once, a foot sticking out from behind a barrel, a shape curled like a comma in a doorway. You pass them the way one passes furniture in a familiar room. Avoiding eye contact with the dead is a kind of etiquette now. You step around them carefully. It's not respect, it's habit. The streets themselves seem to resent your passage. You're not welcome here, even if you're necessary. Your very presence is a reminder that the city is not healing, that the rot has not yet been excised. And so the buildings sigh, the bricks flake. The rain doesn't clean anything, only shifts the filth from one crevice to another. You stop beside a well, dry of course, and sit on its stone lip for a moment, just to catch your breath. The mask hisses softly as you inhale, a choir of damp wool and ancient mint. Your knees ache, and not from age, from effort, from this endless shuffle through something that used to be a place. Someone coughs inside a nearby house. The sound is wet and final. You consider knocking, but you don't. Instead, you rise again. Your knees crack. They always do now. The boots feel heavier than they did an hour ago, possibly because they've absorbed a sample of every fluid known to mankind. Possibly because your soul is tired and has lodged itself somewhere near your ankles. You press onward. There's a child's toy in the gutter, a carved horse, missing a leg, half buried in a slurry of things you would rather not name. You imagine the child who dropped it. Wonder if they even noticed. Wonder if the child is still a child, or now a statistic. The sun, such as it is, filters through a haze of smoke and sky and something else. It has the color of jaundice. You're not sure what time it is. You've stopped caring. Time does not matter when every day smells like rot and regret. A rat scurries past you, bold as anything. It doesn't even flinch. You suspect you've become part of the landscape, just another black-cloaked shadow haunting a city of whispers. You reach the end of the lane where the butcher's shop used to be. Now it's just wood, burned, warped. A sign still hangs above the door, swinging on one hinge like it's trying to forget. You pause, place your hand gently on the frame, and move on. Ahead, the square yawns open like a wound. But that is for later. For now, you step back into the flow of the street. Your foot sinks slightly into something you do not identify. You do not look down. You just keep moving. And in the distance, a bell tolls softly. Not for you, but you hear it anyway. You lean once more into the early morning hush as you cross the worn stones of the courtyard. The faint echo of the city bell lingering in your ears. A reminder of both time and tragedy that never rests. Your shoulders tighten beneath the weight of your outfit. Not just fabric, but expectation. A cloak woven from fears you barely understand. In the pale light, you remember what the title over your doorway proclaims. Doctor. That bit of dry humor, so cleverly stitched, should make you smirk. But today, it's more like a bitter aftertaste you can't swallow. You adjust the crude leather satchel at your hip, the one you sealed last night under candle flame, sealing doubts rather than contents. Inside, vials of brackish water muddied with herbs, spoons that have seen worse broth, and bandages so thin you wonder how they'll hold back anything but your own uncertainty. You consider the irony. Everyone believes you because you look the part, long-beaked mask, bird-like silhouette. But you aren't a real doctor. You never studied. You learned everything in whispers, from old wives stirring porridge toward powdered roots, from market gossip about what worked or didn't. Your knowledge is stolen fragments, not credentials. Yet the people call you doctor and lean in expectant, as though that title could birth certainty where there is none. The morning chill creeps through the gaps in your coat. You shift your weight to the other foot and feel the damp leather begin to buckle. Each step is a reminder that your boots may outlive your ambitions. A grumpy goat tethered nearby regards you with familiar suspicion. Perhaps it knows what you do not, that the badge stitched across your chest is a costume, not a calling. Still, you button your coat tighter, straightening the mask and telling yourself that in this guise, the people need you more than you need to sleep. You walk through the segmented alleys, the stink of last night's rain mixing with straw and sweat. You pass the fishmonger's stall, now empty but for its lingering aroma. The stallholder's eyes meet yours, a fleeting glance of recognition or pity, it is hard to tell. No word is shared, but you carry his gaze like a question you cannot answer. You wonder what it means to be believed, to carry responsibility without knowing what to do with it. You reach the threshold of your first appointment. The door stands ajar, revealing a swell of dim figure. You feel your fingers tighten around the satchel strap. Inside your mind, you whisper that you are here, that you know, that you can help. The words fall somewhere between a promise and a confession. The room is small, pitched low to trap any warmth the morning affords. Its walls are uneven stones, mortared with clay that smells of sweat and straw. The window glass is streaked with grime, so pale light filters in uncertain. The floor is nailed boards, polished smooth by years of barefoot footsteps. A single stool sits in a dusty corner. You kneel before it, not because kneeling is humble. It's just easier than standing when you feel hollow inside. You inspect the patient's hand. It trembles, and the skin is raw in uneven patches, as though the disease has tried to rewrite them. You try not to flinch. You dip your fingers into a jar and pull out a spoonful of grayish poultice that clings to your fingertips like damp clay. You trace lumps and hollows, imagining root fibers pressing blood from flesh. Despite yourself, your mind wanders. If this were modern times, you'd have apps and ultrasounds. Here, you have rotting herbs from the market and a prayer nobody will hear. You smear the paste gently, hoping the texture, cool and snakeskin rough, will soothe pain even if it doesn't cure. Your hand is steady. You speak no words. You don't need to. The patient, a child, or perhaps a grown person made small by sickness, watches you. Their breath comes in faint storms, so soft you almost miss it. In their eyes you read hope. You wonder briefly if you can steal enough skill from the air around you. Listen long enough to learn a cure by osmosis. Your fingers linger, damp and heavy with concoction. You stand, trying not to let gravity remind you how easily you buckle under the mask. You wrap fingers around a small cloth, wiping your spoon on the child's gown. The gesture feels tender and clumsy. You step back, taking in the room once more, and for a moment the patient looks real, alive, separate from illness. But when you leave, they will be there again, lying still, breathing still. You place your bag beside the stool, but nothing in it offers antidote. You straighten your shoulders, brush off imaginary stains, and slip away. Outside the door, the day's damp air greets you again. You continue across the courtyard to the next appointment. Each step lies thick under your feet. You pass other plague doctors, your colleagues. Some glance at you with quiet camaraderie. Others turn away, lost in silent disapproval. You avoid meeting their eyes, but catch reflections in puddles. The mask, the coat, your own posture. Is that enough? You cannot decide. You have to keep moving. On your way out, a neighbor watches from behind latticed shutters, her face so close to the wood it could be etched into it. For a moment, you almost feel guilty. Guilty for stepping in when perhaps you should have stayed home. Guilty for being confident without conviction. Guilty for wearing finery that isn't yours. But the window clicks shut. You keep walking. At the end of the street, you pause beside a dried fountain. You dip your finger into what remains of the water and taste bitterness. You spit into the stone basin. It's habit, nothing more. But it tastes like memory and regret. You stand over the water until dusk treads behind you, lingering as you step away with a backward glance. Later, you find a moment of cellar silence. The fire you banked this morning has cooled into stubborn embers, and you find yourself pulling in the damp warmth of them, trying to absorb something steady. The walls breathe slow, thick with unspoken stories. You kneel to feed the coals with straw, the flames sputter, and the heat flickers. You close your eyes for a heartbeat, enough to feel the warmth sink into your skin, enough to feel like maybe you can do this another day. The night draws near. You realize as you steady the fire's sputter that you will return to another house tomorrow to assess coughing patients and worried families. You are not a real doctor, but you carry the title like a borrowed coat, one you may soon outgrow or drown in. Yet here, in the ashes and the heat, you choose to stay. You leave the fire to its slow burn and step into the creeping dusk, your silhouette a tapered shadow against brittle walls, a half-remembered promise that tomorrow you'll keep pretending until you learn to heal. The street doesn't notice you at first, or rather, it pretends not to. That's how it begins most mornings. You emerge from behind the warped wooden door that barely pretends to fit its frame. Your boots sticky with yesterday's regrets, your mask already humid with the scent of its own failure. You don't look up. You know what happens when you look up. You meet eyes. And when you meet eyes, things get uncomfortable for both of you. You carry yourself like a shadow, but not the comforting kind that brings shade on a sunny afternoon. No, you are the type of shadow that clings to corners long after the candle has been snuffed. You are the afterthought no one wants to think again. You are wrapped in layers that stink of boiled leather and unanswered prayers. You rattle faintly when you move, like someone shaking a bag of fear and old coins. And the street hears you, eventually. It starts with the silence. The kind that isn't really silence, but the drawing in of breath. A stall-keeper's hand hesitates over a bruised apple. A child's muddy foot pauses mid-step, hovering like a question it's too young to ask. A broom stops mid-sweep, and then the hush rolls out, soft and slow, like someone smoothing down wrinkled sheets before the body's been removed. Eyes. You feel them first, like insects crawling across your scalp, except more judgmental. There are old women with mouths like pursed drawstrings, their wrinkles folding in upon themselves in mild horror. There are wide-eyed boys pretending not to be afraid, because they've been taught that fear makes you a goat, and goats don't get remembered. There's the smith, who grips his hammer too tight whenever you pass, as if he's worried you'll diagnose his anvil next. And then there's the dog, the same mottled, three-legged mongrel that watches you every day with the confused suspicion of a creature who thinks you're part scarecrow, part thunderstorm. No one says anything, not out loud, not ever, but their glances say more than sermons. You are the walking embodiment of a worst-case scenario, dressed in linen and leather and a healthy layer of public discomfort. You are the thing people see right before things go badly. Not because you caused it, but because you show up when it's already too late. Like a vulture with a clipboard. You try to walk like you don't notice. You try to step over the puddles that are absolutely not water. You keep your shoulders square and your pace measured. But it's hard to look dignified when one of your boots is coming loose at the heel and makes a sad flapping sound with every other step, like a duck trying not to cry. It's also hard to look imposing when your mask is slightly crooked and keeps drifting to the left, giving you the perpetual expression of someone who's halfway through regretting a decision. And yet, despite all this, people move aside. Not out of respect. Not even out of fear, really. It's more like the way people avoid a spoiled joint of meat at the market. Not because it's dangerous, but because it might stick to their memory if they get too close. You pass a man loading sacks onto a cart. He pauses, pretends to rearrange one. He's not sick. Yet. But he's thinking about it now. He scratches his beard like it might hide answers. He eyes your beaked mask like it might start clucking. You keep walking. A window creaks open overhead. The shutters squeal like rats being stepped on. You don't look up. You don't need to. You can feel it. Someone peering through the warped glass, holding their breath, watching to see where you'll go, what house you'll choose, as if your presence alone determines fate, as if your shadow, cast across a doorstep, means doom. You make the mistake of glancing sideways. There's a child staring at you from behind a stack of firewood. He doesn't flinch, just stares. The kind of stare that drills holes. You can't see his expression. It's shadowed by the wood and the dirt and the general ambience of suspicion. But you know what it is. That slack-jawed uncertainty. The beginning of fear. The origin story of a future adult who will one day tell his children that he saw death itself walking past the bakery. And it had your gait. And your limp. You don't speak. You never speak. Not out here. Your voice is too dry from breathing in herbs and linen and the general anxiety of existing. You carry your stick like a scepter that no one asked for. It clicks against the cobblestones, softly, like a metronome for doom. The truth is, you are not feared because you're powerful. You're feared because you are the visible symbol of invisible danger. You're not a sword. You're a storm cloud. People don't hate you. They hate what follows you. They hate the idea that if you're here, then something else, something much worse, must also be close. You've become a sort of human warning sign, except you can't be read, and there's no safe detour. And so you trudge on, your feet sticking slightly with every step, the street damp with fluids you refuse to identify. You pass the tannery, which somehow smells better than your mask. You pass the bakery, where no one offers you bread, though someone does cross themselves, not out of piety, but habit. A gesture against misfortune, like knocking on wood or avoiding goats named after relatives. You are part of the scenery now, an architectural feature of misfortune, a statue that sweats and moves and occasionally prods people with a stick. You are always seen, never greeted, and somehow this suits the morning just fine. You pass a wall that was once whitewashed, now the color of phlegm and pessimism. There's something scribbled on it in charcoal, a prayer, or maybe a curse, depending on your level of optimism. The ink has run, or the wall has wept. Either way, it feels damp, and you don't want to think about why. The city has become a collection of corners no one dares to clean, of smells that refuse to name themselves. And in the midst of it all, you, the beaked sentinel, the leathery omen, march on. There's a woman at the well. She sees you and clutches her child tighter. You weren't going to say anything. You weren't even looking in her direction. But now she's turning away, her back stiff as a broom handle, muttering something about not letting the child see, as if you're a contagious nightmare. You nod, out of habit, as though she greeted you. You nod because it's what people do. You try to be human, even as your mask steams from the inside and your fingers have begun to smell like yesterday's vinegar compress. You round a corner where the mud gets thicker, except it probably isn't mud. You try not to examine the consistency too closely. A rat scampers across your path, pausing just long enough to give you the look of a peer, fellow professional in the art of urban survival. It doesn't run from you, just nods in its own rodent way and disappears beneath a shuttered stall. Even the rats have accepted you. That might be the worst part. Then comes the part of the street where people have stopped pretending, the ones who don't look away, who don't bother masking their disgust. A group of young men, apprentices maybe, lounging outside the cooper's shop with sawdust in their hair and mischief in their eyes. You feel their gazes like cold needles. One of them snorts. Another makes a low, mocking squawk, an imitation of your mask, you suppose. You keep walking. You do not slow. You do not dignify. But something inside you tightens, like the strap of your satchel pulled too taut. You're used to the stares, the fear. But the ridicule? That's different. It's not the same as grief. It has sharp edges. It slices instead of smothers. There's nothing noble in being the town's necessary evil. There's just the awkward awareness that everyone wants you gone. They just don't want to need you first. Ahead, someone spits. Not at you, just near you. Coincidentally, very coincidentally. The spit hits a puddle and ripples out, a perfect little circle of passive aggression. You step over it without pausing, but your foot lands on something softer than it should be. A rag, or a cloth, or... no. Best not to identify it. You keep going. There's a vendor packing up his cart as you approach. He was selling onions, or possibly turnips masquerading as onions. You weren't going to stop, but he doesn't take the risk. He begins fumbling with his crates, stuffing things into sacks with a nervous speed that suggests he thinks your presence will poison the vegetables. One of them rolls away, hits your boot, and bounces back toward him. He doesn't retrieve it. You think about saying something ordinary, a polite "good morning," or even a half-hearted grunt. But what would be the point? Words feel too alive for this street, too hopeful. You are not hopeful. You are a man in a bird's mask, sweating into his own herbs. And always, the children. They stare the longest, their eyes wide and unblinking, like cats at dusk. Some hide behind their mothers, others point. One little girl clutches a ragged doll and whispers something to it while never breaking eye contact with you. The doll has one button eye and one sewn shut, a bit like you, half seeing, half denying. Sometimes you wonder what stories they'll tell, about the figure in black, about the beak, about the long stick and the longer silences. Will you become a tale to scare them into obedience? Finish your chores, or the plague doctor will come. Or will you fade into the background of their memory, like a smudge in the corner of a painting they can't quite explain? Your stomach growls, loudly, rudely. It reminds you that you skipped breakfast again. The gruel was thinner than usual, and the company colder. You left before the awkward silence could congeal. Now, your belly mutinies in the middle of the road, a hollow drumbeat echoing beneath your robes. Someone hears it. A woman laughs. You are officially a farce now. You turn down another alley, hoping for fewer eyes. But even the walls seem to judge you here. They lean inward, heavy with dampness and mildew, as if trying to whisper to each other behind your back. A shutter slams above. A cat yowls below. Somewhere, someone coughs. Not a delicate cough. No, this is the kind of wet, chest-deep hacking that echoes. You hesitate. You glance toward the sound, but the door is already bolted shut. They've made their choice. You move on. The street opens again. A square of sorts. There's a fountain that hasn't worked in years, unless you count the moss as plumbing. Someone's tied a prayer ribbon to the base, faded fabric, fraying in the breeze. It flutters like a weak heartbeat. You pause near it, not out of reverence, just to breathe without people watching. The breeze picks up. It carries the smell of too many things layered on top of one another. Spoiled food, wet wool, burnt fat, human worry. The wind cuts through your robes and into your bones, reminding you that fear may be the main currency here, but cold is still the tax. You stay there a while, pretending the square is empty. Pretending you are too. You are not, of course. Not truly. You carry everything. Every glance, every cough, every slammed door and held breath and laugh that wasn't meant to hurt, but did anyway. You carry them in your mask, in your boots, in the aching line of your shoulders. You carry them because you must, because that's what your role demands. Not healing, not wisdom, just presence. You are the symbol they need so they don't have to look at the real thing. The sickness, the uncertainty, the failure of prayer and poultices. You are the mask they wear on their fears, and you never get to take yours off. Eventually, you move again. You don't know where you're going. Somewhere else, anywhere else. A place with fewer eyes, or different ones. The ones that haven't looked at you yet. You walk, and the sound of your stick follows, steady and soft, like the closing of a door behind someone who was never really welcome. You don't intend to stop walking, but eventually your feet find the threshold of your next visit, and the world shifts. Not dramatically. Not like the sun cracking open the clouds or the ground trembling with divine revelation. No, it shifts like a floorboard warping under slow rot, subtle, sour, and inevitable. The kind of shift you feel more in your lungs than your ears. A wrongness not shouted, but breathed in. The house tilts slightly to one side, like it's grown weary of pretending to stand. Its thatch roof curls downward at the edges, heavy with moisture and moss, and more birds than you're willing to count. The door doesn't so much hang as it slumps, and the frame is flecked with mildew that resembles the pattern of veins in a sickly leaf. There's no bell to ring, no knocker. You announce yourself the way you always do, by existing outside, audibly. A cough, a step, the creak of your leather gloves as you shift your weight. You think they heard. Eventually, the door creaks open, slowly, as if remembering how. No face greets you, just the absence of it. A retreating shape, a whispered gesture, a beckoning shadow that doesn't want to commit to full invitation. You step in anyway. You always do. That's the job. The threshold is low, so your mask hits it. Again, you've stopped counting. The edge of the beak scrapes the beam, dislodging a curl of soot or cobweb or some indecisive hybrid of both. It floats down slowly. You pretend it's symbolic. Then forget what it might have symbolized. Inside, the air is thicker than it should be. Not smoky, exactly. more like it's been used too many times. Like every exhalation in the room has clung to the walls, stacked in invisible drifts, weighted with the scent of boiled onions and slow decay. The kind of air that doesn't just fill your lungs, but lingers behind your eyes. Your boots sink slightly into the packed earth floor, which has the consistency of old bread and the temperature of old regret. The boards above groan with a weight you'd rather not analyze. There's something upstairs. Or someone. You won't be going up there. You never do. To your left, a table, crooked, half covered with a cloth that has fused with its surface like a scab. 2 bowls sit side by side, one empty, one containing what might be broth, or water, or the tears of a turnip. A spoon floats in it like a shipwreck, too tired to sink. To your right, the patient. Probably. They're huddled on a cot built for someone less complicated by gravity. Straw leaks from the mattress like accusations. The blanket is more whole than cloth, more suggestion than warmth. You see only the shape of them, the outline beneath the layers, the slow rising fall of breath, or at least you think it's breath. You hope it's breath, for everyone's sake. You approach gently as one can while wrapped in creaking leather, dragging the faint smell of vinegar and rosemary behind you like an embarrassing pet. The patient stirs, or shifts. It's hard to tell. Their hand emerges from the blanket like a branch in winter, dry, knotty, and somehow ancient, even if they're only 30 or 12. Age isn't a reliable number these days. You pull your satchel forward. It sticks briefly to your coat. Sweat. Always sweat. Inside the bag, your instruments, the ones that pretend to be useful, a worn stick of chalk, a rusted lancet, a pouch of dried herbs that smell like guilt. You don't reach for any of them just yet. First, you listen. Not with your ears. Not really. With your skin. With your bones. With that heavy place between your shoulders where the weight of things collects. The house speaks, if you know how to hear it. The walls creak in apology. The hearth coughs in its sleep. The window lets in a draft that's more judgment than air. There's a pot in the corner with something growing in it, or rotting. A child's shoe beside it. Small. Frayed. Forgotten. You kneel beside the patient, and the ground murmurs its displeasure beneath your knees. You place a hand, gloved, always, on their shoulder. The heat there is troubling. Not the warmth of health, but the kind that suggests something deeper, like a fire left too long beneath the floorboards. A heat that isn't helping, that might never help again. You don't speak. You never do. What would you say? The mask does all the talking. It looms. It implies. It declares, silently, that this visit is serious, that something is wrong, that something was probably always wrong, and this is simply the chapter where it becomes undeniable. The patient wheezes. The sound is damp, layered with textures you can't describe without losing your appetite. You sit with it for a while. Let the moment stretch. Let them be seen, even if your eyes are hidden behind thick, fogged glass. Sometimes that's all there is to give. Eventually, you reach for the pouch, the one with the herbs. You don't believe they work, but they smell sharp, and people believe in smells. You place a pinch into a small cloth square, fold it, tie it. You tuck it beneath their pillow. You don't know if they notice. You don't know if they care. You stand, slowly. Every joint protests. Every vertebra reminds you that this job is made for someone younger, or someone made entirely of lies. You nod, even though no one's watching. You always nod, like punctuation on an unread letter. You move to the next room, if it can be called that. It's more of an alcove, a space where things go to be forgotten. There's a basket of linen stiff with time, a bundle of dried something hanging from the rafters, garlic, or memories, a stool with 3 legs and 1 bad attitude. Someone has scratched a charm into the wall, a circle with lines, protective, probably, or decorative, or maybe just hopeful graffiti. It's smudged now. Time doesn't care for symbols. The light in here is worse. Thinner, like it's afraid to touch anything. You don't blame it. You pull out your chalk. Kneel again. You make a mark by the doorway. A crescent. Not a symbol anyone taught you. Just one you use. To say, I was here. I tried. Maybe next time. Outside, the world hasn't improved. The sun is doing its best impression of absence, and the air is getting meaner with every hour. You pull your robe tighter, though it won't help. The cold always finds the seams. You glance back at the door, still open, still sagging, like a jaw too tired to shut. You imagine the house collapsing behind you, not all at once, not dramatically, just giving up, slowly, board by board, nail by rusted nail. You imagine it sighing into the ground, as if it too has seen enough. Your next stop is only 3 doors down. You're not ready. You never are. You go anyway. That's the job. You walk slower than before. Not because you're tired, though you are, but because the houses are starting to look alike. Each one a variation on the same theme. Damp, leaning, coughing. Like the whole town was built from the same sick wood. You knock. You always knock, even when the door is already open. A voice answers. Or maybe it's the wind pretending. You step in, and the house breathes you in like it's been waiting. The air still clings to you, thick and sour with the memory of the last home you visited, where the wallpaper had given up and slumped from the walls like a depressed curtain. You haven't shed the scent of mildew, or the feeling of your boots squelching in something unidentifiable near the hearth. Your hands ache from clutching the wooden walking stick, a stick that pretends to be a symbol of authority, but mostly helps you avoid stepping directly on something or someone. You shuffle back through the alleyways and crooked paths with the gait of a person who's been inhaling damp straw and despair since sunrise. You've arrived at the part of your day that many would call treatment. You, however, call it hoping no one asks questions you can't answer, which is all of them. The patient lies propped on a bed that groans under its own regret. There is no spring to the straw-stuffed mattress, only the scratch of years and the slow, deliberate flattening of hope. Their face is pale, pale in that way that makes other colors jealous. You nod in what you believe to be a competent manner and open your bag, a museum of misguided intentions. The tools jangle like poorly made wind chimes, a sad little symphony of things that were never sharp and never sterilized. You retrieve the leeches first. They're the stars of your show, after all. You've convinced yourself they enjoy their work, more than you do, certainly. You keep them in a jar that smells like yesterday's river and something slightly more alive than it ought to be. Their little bodies writhe as you unscrew the lid, like gummy worms with ambitions. You pretend not to notice one staring at you. Or maybe that's just your imagination, increasingly unhinged from reality by lack of sleep and the constant soundtrack of distant coughing. You explain nothing. That's your trick. Explanations invite questions, and questions are what topple the whole precarious facade of being a doctor. Instead, you press a leech gently onto the patient's skin and watch as it latches with a commitment you can only admire. It knows what it's here for. The patient winces. You nod again, as if that means something, as if pain is progress, as if you aren't mostly just moving blood around like a child mixing soup with a stick. Soon, you bring out your blade, the kind of blade that would be offended if you called it sharp. It's more of a suggestion of a knife, rusted and slightly bent, with a handle that wobbles like a loose tooth. You give it a wipe on your robe, which has been through enough already and doesn't need your shame added to it. Then, with the caution of someone pretending to know anatomy, you make a small incision. The blood seeps slowly, unenthusiastic. You collect it in a bowl that once held porridge, then urine, then regret. It smells faintly metallic, like someone dropped a penny into a puddle of bad decisions. The patient groans again. You nod again. You glance around the room while waiting for the bowl to fill. There's a tapestry on the wall, faded beyond meaning, and a mouse peering from under the cupboard like it's judging your technique. The air is too still. Even the dust motes seem to be holding their breath. You check the pulse, or at least you press fingers against a wrist and hope your own heartbeat doesn't confuse the reading. It's impossible to say what's normal anymore. You mostly judge health by how loudly someone curses when you touch them. Satisfied that nothing has improved, you bandage the wound with a piece of linen that used to be part of a curtain, or maybe someone's undergarment. You no longer ask. You mutter something vaguely reassuring, the verbal equivalent of waving incense over spoiled meat. Then you pack your tools, which clink together like they're mocking you in Morse code. You've done what's expected. You've done what's possible. You've done absolutely nothing helpful. The patient smiles faintly, or perhaps their face just sags in a way that resembles gratitude. You take it as a win. You need wins, even imaginary ones, just to get through the morning. Outside, the wind greets you with a slap of icy indifference. You pull your robe tighter, though it doesn't help. The wool has long since surrendered its insulating properties and now functions mostly as a portable collection of bad smells. The beaked mask fogs with every breath, making it harder to see. Not that there's much worth seeing. A city dying slowly looks much like a city that's already dead, only with more noise. Your next patient is just across the square, in a home that leans as if it's trying to escape. You tap the door frame with your stick, not to knock. There's no point. But to see if it'll collapse. It doesn't. You take that as a good sign. Inside, you find a young man lying on a pallet that might once have been a rug. His eyes flutter open, revealing that he's still among the living, at least technically. You smile, or rather, you assume your face does something underneath the mask. You've lost track. This one's for bloodletting again. Of course it is. It's always bloodletting, or leeches, or both. You perform the ritual with the same solemnity as before. Blade, bowl, bandage. All the steps of a sacred dance that no one believes in anymore. You wish it worked. You wish you had even the slightest indication it ever had. But the patient's color doesn't change. His breathing remains shallow. All you've really done is make the room smell worse. You step back, clean your blade on another unlucky square of fabric, and glance out the window. The sky is that uncertain shade of gray that could mean rain, snow, or the wrath of the heavens. You try to remember when you last saw the sun. You try not to think about it. Back outside, the wind howls through the alleys like it's searching for someone specific. You hope it's not you. You walk quickly now, boots crunching over frost and refuse, past a child who watches you with the wide eyes of someone deciding whether to fear you or follow you. You nod at them. They vanish. You turn the corner and spot another household waving you in. You don't recognize them. You never do. Every face blends together now, a blur of desperation and exhaustion. You enter, sit by the fireless hearth, and begin again. Leeches, blood, salve, words that mean nothing. By the time the sky turns a dim, pewter hue of near evening, your hands are stiff and stained. You've collected more blood than answers, heard more coughing than conversation, and offered more gestures than solutions. Your bag feels heavier, not because it contains more, but because it reminds you how little you have to offer. The mask begins to chafe at the bridge of your nose. You can feel your skin rebelling underneath it. You long to take it off, just for a moment, just to feel air that hasn't been filtered through damp herbs and denial. But you don't. Not because of protocol. No one remembers the protocols. But because the mask is the last thing standing between you and the people who think you're a doctor. You reach the edge of the square, where the bells are tolling faintly, and lean against a crooked post that threatens to topple with you. You close your eyes behind the lenses, trying to forget the weight in your arms, the wet cold in your boots, the ache in your lower back that's becoming a part of your personality. Somewhere, someone screams. Somewhere else, someone prays. You try not to listen too closely to either, and as your fingers loosen around the handle of your bag, you think of what's next. Another round, another door, another face looking at you like salvation. You will enter that room. You will nod solemnly. You will do what's expected. But not yet. Not just yet. For now, you simply breathe. And the silence of your empty answers stretches, softly, into the distance, where something even colder than leeches awaits. There's a strange heaviness to midday. Not the comforting kind, like warm bread resting on a hearth. No, this is the kind of weight that seeps into your bones. Not from fatigue exactly, but from the slow, suffocating realization that the day is far from over and you're expected to keep pretending it matters. You return from your morning rounds with the soft crunch of ash and dust still in your boots, your stick flecked with a substance you refuse to examine too closely. The beak of your mask is heavy with breath and something vaguely floral, though even the herbs inside are beginning to smell like surrender. You sit where you always sit, the uneven bench tucked against a damp stone wall, which leans just enough to make you feel as though you are constantly sliding, slowly, toward resignation. The surface is wet. Of course it is. Everything is wet these days, though the sky has not offered rain. The moisture simply is, as if the city has begun to sweat out its own fever. Your lunch is already waiting for you. Or perhaps waiting is the wrong word. Accusing might be more accurate. It's a chunk of bread the color of forgotten parchment, stale enough to double as a blunt instrument, accompanied by a thin broth that has made no promises and kept them all. You pick at it with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for dental appointments, and the bread responds like it resents being eaten. It flakes, but not in a pleasant way, more like old ceiling plaster. And when you dunk it in the broth, it behaves like a corpse briefly reanimated, then unwilling to return to the bowl it came from. Around you, the city hums its ceaseless song of rot, the distant clang of a bell, a cough that never quite ends, the muffled sob of a mother whose grief no longer sounds urgent, just practiced. Even the dogs have learned to howl in lowercase, as if they too understand that to be loud is to waste precious breath. You listen to it all and try not to think. But of course you do. Your mind, the treacherous beast that it is, wanders the same ruts over and over, like a cartwheel carved into soft dirt, going nowhere, but going there insistently. You wonder if this is what the rest of your days will look like. A half meal in the middle of a half-life, interrupted only by death and the occasional misplaced hope. You chew on a mouthful of bread and question whether it was baked with flour or ground up memories. Either way, it is dry. Your fellow plague workers, not colleagues so much as witnesses to your unraveling, sit at a distance, not out of disrespect, merely out of habit. Everyone keeps their distance now. You imagine they are also eating something equally uninspired. One of them has taken to bringing onions with every meal, raw, whole, biting into them like apples. You don't ask why. You know why. He believes they keep the sickness away. He reeks of sourness and desperation. But so do you, in your own way. There's a fly buzzing around your bowl. Persistent, bold. It lands on the lip of your spoon and stares at you as if challenging your claim to the meal. You stare back. For a moment, you consider letting it have the broth. It might actually enjoy it. But you shoo it away, if only because you need to pretend you still care about something. The mask rests beside you on the bench, tilted in a way that makes it look judgmental. Like even the mask is disappointed in your life choices. You wipe the inside of it with a cloth that used to be white. You're not sure if it's helping or just rearranging the filth. Either way, it's ritual. And rituals, like soup, are sometimes more about heat than substance. Someone passes nearby. You look up. They look away. You don't blame them. You sip the broth and try to feel nourished. It tastes like regret boiled in rainwater. There might have once been a turnip involved, but it left early and without a trace. The warmth, at least, is genuine. Not enough to be comfort, just enough to remind you what comfort used to feel like. You wrap your hands around the bowl like it might tell you something. It doesn't. It just cools, slowly and inevitably, like everything else. A wind passes through the alley, smelling of smoke and soap and something sour. You catch yourself holding your breath. Not out of fear. You're past that, but out of routine. As if avoiding one inhalation might somehow keep death at bay. It won't. But you do it anyway. It's amazing what hope clings to. Across the way, someone sneezes, loudly, wetly. You flinch and then feel foolish for flinching. You've stood in rooms filled with the dying. But sneezes, they still carry a primitive dread, as if the air itself is trying to kill you. You sip again. The fly returns. You let it land. The bench creaks beneath your weight, complaining like an old friend who never approved of your career choices but stuck around anyway. You shift, not for comfort. That ship sailed before breakfast. But to see if the breeze might dry the sweat gathering in the small of your back. It doesn't. The breeze doesn't care. Someone else joins you on the bench. Close enough to be seen, not close enough to be known. They don't speak. Neither do you. There's nothing left to say. Conversation has become a luxury. And besides, what could possibly be said that hasn't already been groaned by the earth itself? You chew slowly and let silence stretch between you like another layer of clothing. The broth is almost gone now. You tilt the bowl and consider licking it. You don't. Not because it's improper, but because your tongue might revolt. You set it down and stare at the smear of dregs at the bottom, a constellation of floating mystery specks that may once have been ingredients or simply dreams. Somewhere nearby, a child laughs or coughs. You can't tell the difference anymore. You wipe your fingers on the same cloth you used on the mask. It's all one mess now. One long, drawn-out, shared contamination. You pull the mask back on, the beak pressing against your face like a reminder. You are not a person right now. You are a shape, a warning, a scent of camphor and sweat held together by thread and denial. And as you rise from the bench, creaking along with the wood, you feel the pull of the afternoon waiting, an endless stretch of doorways and stairs, and people hoping you know something you absolutely do not. Your stomach, having been introduced to food and then promptly ghosted by it, growls in quiet betrayal. You sigh, fogging the glass of your mask from the inside. You tap it clean with a gloved thumb, though it smears more than it clears, as usual. And with your broth now gone, your bread barely dented, and the taste of damp wood clinging to your tongue, you begin to shuffle toward the next misery, the next knock, the next prayer disguised as a question. The day is far from over, and the worst part is, it probably won't end anytime soon. Just a little farther down the road, the bell begins to ring again, the one that signals the cart, and all the things you're not ready to see. But that's for later. For now, your lunch is finished. And you are not. Not yet. Not quite. But nearly. Nearly. And the wind carries the sound of your footsteps. Slow, hollow, and fading. The silence settles around you again, though not the comforting kind. It's the heavy sort that sinks into your shoulders, folds itself into the creases of your coat, and lingers like the scent of old wax and sour wine. You adjust the straps of your mask, though the leather sticks slightly to the sweat behind your ears. The air is damp, but not in the pleasant way of spring rain or mist on a hillside. This damp is weighted, as if the air itself is rotting. You wonder how long it's been since you've breathed something you'd call clean. You've stopped counting footsteps because the ground has ceased to be reliable. The street, if it deserves that word, has become a softened mixture of dirt, ash, and other things. Some of them once had names. You step carefully, though the soles of your boots gave up resisting this city long ago. They soak up the filth like old bread dropped into a gutter puddle. One of them squelches. You pretend it didn't. The buildings around you lean at odd angles, as if they're tired too. Tired of watching, of sheltering the dying, of being asked to hold together when their beams are already bowed from too much grief. The shutters hang open, or not at all, and those that remain flap weakly like dying wings. A tangle of linen hangs from an upstairs window, swaying like a lazy flag. You suspect someone once tied it there in hope, or desperation, or both. That was at least 3 cartloads ago. You pause near a heap of rags that might have once been a woman. The color of the cloth is indistinguishable from the filth beneath it, and you realize the only way you can tell it was someone is the tiny foot still visible beneath the folds, curled inward, delicately, like it forgot it was part of a body that had stopped needing it. You don't touch it. You don't need to. Someone else will, soon. That someone else is coming now. You hear them before you see them, which is always how it goes. The creak of wheels thick with mud, the dull thump of something soft hitting something harder, or perhaps the other way around. And the bell, that God-forsaken bell. It rings without ceremony, without rhythm, without any attempt to sound like something other than a warning. It is not a call to action. It is a call to retreat. You step back into the hollow of a doorway, and the wood behind you is damp and cold. A spider, far too comfortable in its own damp apartment, brushes your shoulder as it retreats deeper into its crevice. You don't bother brushing it away. The spider, at least, is honest. It weaves and eats and survives. You, on the other hand, perform a ritual with no clear meaning, wearing a beak stuffed with herbs to chase away spirits you no longer believe in. The cart comes into view. It is always smaller than you think it should be. Somehow it manages to be both overloaded and skeletal, like a skeleton trying to carry more skeletons. The wheels groan with each revolution, and the wood shudders as if trying to escape its own role in this performance. The driver does not speak. You've never heard one speak. They ring the bell, they hold the reins, and they steer their cart full of death, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, which, in this town, it is. You glance up as it passes, eyes catching on a bundle near the top of the pile. Cloth again. A hand again. This one is curled like it's holding something invisible. Maybe it was. Maybe it still is. There's no ceremony, no prayers, no names whispered, no last rites, unless the rats have developed liturgies of their own. The cart just keeps going, moving through the city like a river that only collects what's already drowned. Behind it, the bell fades until it is no longer a sound, but an ache behind your teeth. The kind of sound you still hear after it's gone, like regret echoing through bone. And you stand there, in the doorway of a house that might not be standing tomorrow, wondering whether you nodded to the driver or just imagined it. You can't remember if you've eaten today. You can't remember if you want to. The smell that follows the cart isn't one scent, but many. Sweat and fear and meat left too long in the sun. It clings to the air like soot in a chimney, and you breathe it in despite the beak, despite the herbs, despite the little rituals you still perform without believing. Your fingers twitch. You're still holding the walking stick, the long, thin extension of yourself that prods and tests and never comforts. You look down at it, noticing the dirt caked into its carved head, and you wonder if it remembers how many times it has nudged something no longer alive. You don't put the stick away. You never do. It's not for walking. You wait a while after the cart is gone, though you don't really know why. There's no one left to avoid. Maybe you're waiting for the air to clear, but it never really does. It just shifts. Like soup that's been left out too long, it thickens in some corners and thins in others, never improving. You step out from the doorway, and the ground makes a wet sound under your heel. You imagine the city sighing under your weight, trying to forget you exist. You pass a row of shuttered stalls, the kind that once held bread and fish and poorly carved trinkets, back when the city was noisy in a different way. Now they're husks. Fabric awnings sag with rain and mildew, and the only thing for sale is the echo of things you can't afford to remember. One stall has a few onions left, strangely unclaimed. You think about taking one, then think about what it would taste like, raw and grimy and full of other people's breath. You keep walking. A dog stares at you from beneath a broken cart. You don't remember when dogs stopped barking. This one just watches, ears low, too thin even to be suspicious. It doesn't flee, and it doesn't approach. You're both professionals, in your own miserable way, and your territories have stopped overlapping. You nod. It doesn't nod back. That feels fair. The sun is somewhere above all this, but you wouldn't know it. The light is gray, the kind of gray that seeps into your bones and makes your skin feel damp even when it's not. Your breath fogs a little inside the mask, then curls back toward you, reminding you that your own lungs are still working. You're not sure that's a comfort. You pause again when you hear another cart, smaller this time. Not the official one, a private one. That's worse somehow. The wheels are uneven, the bell is missing, and the person dragging it isn't even trying to hide the struggle. They are hunched, wrapped in too many layers of despair and not enough warmth. One arm is slung protectively over the cart's contents, a pile of cloth that doesn't hide the shape of something once young. You turn slightly, giving them space. It's not respect. It's not decency. It's just routine. The way people avert their eyes in church when someone starts crying. No one is pretending anymore. We all know what's in the cart. You wonder if anyone will say the child's name. You wonder if the person dragging the cart is even sure what day it is. You imagine them returning home to a room that smells wrong, to an empty cup, to a chair they can't sit in without seeing an absence. Your feet hurt. They always do. But this is a new hurt. Not sharp, just tired. Like your bones are asking you to stop pretending you'll ever be off duty. You sit, eventually, on a stone step that used to lead into a bakery. The scent is gone now. All that's left is a slick of ash and flour on the ground that turns to paste when the fog rolls in. You lean back against the stone and listen. Not to birds. There are fewer now, and they sing less. Not to people. They speak less too. You listen to the city breathe, if it still does. There is a trickling noise nearby, but it's not water. Not clean water anyway. A gutter overflows gently, carrying the runoff of lives pressed too close together for too long. Bits of cloth, something like a shoe, something you refuse to identify. You watch it pass like a philosopher watches the stars, slowly, and with the quiet resignation of someone who knows they'll never understand what any of it means. The dead cart comes back, eventually. A different one, or maybe the same. You're not keeping track. The driver still doesn't speak. You wonder if they ever take the mask off, or if they've become part of it, like you have. You wonder if they ever eat, or if the smell of the cart has burned away their appetite permanently. You wonder if they still see people, or only bundles. The cart turns the corner and disappears. The sound lingers, then fades. There's a man sitting in an alley nearby. Not dead. Not yet. He watches you, but not the way people usually do. His eyes are clear, but not hopeful. Just alert. You imagine he used to be a teacher, or a baker, or someone who whistled badly while working. You imagine he had a favorite spoon. You imagine he hasn't seen it in weeks. He doesn't speak. You don't speak. Your masks are too heavy for words anyway, but you nod slightly, and his head tilts just enough in response. You both return to your silences. The day is crawling now. You think about your next stop, the next home, the next small room full of air that can't be trusted. You think about the herbs in your pouch, half of them stale, some of them possibly just moss, and you wonder why you keep using them. They don't do anything, really. But rituals are like that. You do them until they stop being questions. You rise again. The step creaks as if it remembers better days. Your knees disagree with the motion, but that's nothing new. The stick helps. It always does. You start walking. You keep an ear out for the bell. You know it'll come again. It always does. And just before you disappear into the fog again, you think about how tomorrow's cart might roll a little heavier, and how one day you might recognize someone on it. Or they might recognize you. But for now, you keep walking. Your mask squeaks. Your breath is hot and stale. The city swallows you again. And somewhere in the haze, a chapel bell rings faintly. Not a warning this time, but something more useless. Hope, or superstition. Either way, it sounds like a good place to go next. You don't even remember walking to the chapel. Your feet carried you here, while your thoughts remained somewhere else, tangled up in the folds of your cloak, caught in the mask's stale interior, drifting alongside the dust you keep breathing in. The chapel is as familiar to you as hunger, and just as unsatisfying. Stone walls too thick for comfort. Candles that never burn all the way down. Incense that smells like someone tried to cover guilt with rosemary and lost the recipe halfway through. The door groans when you push it open, a tired hinge mirroring your own reluctance. It doesn't creak like it did when you were a child. Back then, it sounded mysterious, like a secret about to whisper itself. Now it just sounds like wood that's had enough. You step inside and let the gloom swallow you. Not a heavy gloom, not quite. Just enough dimness to make your thoughts feel softer around the edges, like something padded and a little damp. The pews are mostly empty, which is a kindness. Fewer eyes, fewer assumptions, fewer whispered prayers you're not equipped to answer. You lower yourself onto the third bench from the front, the one with the uneven leg. It wobbles just enough to make you feel alive, which is ironic, considering the setting. The wood bites into your thighs through your robe. You shift. It doesn't help. The splinters find new places to investigate. You let them. Somewhere near the altar, the priest pretends not to notice you. He's not doing a very good job. You can feel his sideways glance the way you feel an old wound in the rain. He's standing too still to be at peace. You recognize that stillness. It's the kind you practice when you're trying not to become a part of the moment. A kind of invisible hiding in plain sight. It never works. You reach up and loosen the strap on your mask. Just a bit. Just enough to let the scent of old wax and sanctified dust drift through. It smells exactly like disappointment, if disappointment had a temperature and wore robes. The air in here is warmer than outside, but not by much. Just enough to confuse your body into thinking it should be grateful. You're not sure what that warmth is made of. Probably faith or mildew. The chapel has always looked the same. Tall windows that don't open. Saints with blank stares. A ceiling that disappears into shadows as if heaven got stuck halfway down. You try to pray, but the words in your head don't line up. They get tangled somewhere between the litany of names you can't forget and the wheezing breath of the woman you couldn't help. The one with the baby who didn't cry. The one who asked you if it would hurt. You said no. You lied. It always hurts, even when it's over. The priest moves, slowly. He walks past the altar, not toward you, not away from you, just passed. His footsteps echo more than they should. The stones here remember everyone. They remember the good men and the ones who tried. You watch him pass and realize he's muttering something under his breath. You don't need to know the words. You already know they don't help. There's a candle beside you, crooked in its holder. The wax has melted down one side like a slow collapse. You wonder if anyone will notice when it finally gives up. Probably not. Things fall apart quietly these days. No trumpets, no ceremony, just sagging and silence. You light the candle anyway. It doesn't need a reason. Neither do you. Your hands smell like vinegar and old fabric. The gloves didn't help much. Everything seeps through. You stare at the flame and try to feel cleansed, or at least less filthy. But the dirt isn't on your hands. It's in your lungs, behind your eyes, pressed into the folds of your thoughts. And it doesn't wash off. Not with fire. Not with prayer. The pew across from you is cracked. Someone carved a symbol into it once. A circle with lines through it, like a sun that forgot how to shine. You trace it with your eyes and pretend it means something. Hope, maybe. Or memory. Or a warning. It's easier than thinking about the family you saw this morning, huddled together in a room that smelled like the end of everything. You gave them herbs, told them to rest. You didn't tell them the truth. That rest is just waiting in softer clothes. The priest finally approaches. Not quickly, not kindly. He sits beside you, but not too close. His breath smells like cloves and silence. You don't look at him. He doesn't speak. That's fine. You didn't come for answers. You just came to not be alone while failing to find them. The bench groans beneath you both, like it knows you're heavier with guilt than with flesh. You wonder if God listens differently in places like this. If the prayers here are louder, or if they just echo more before fading into the stone. You don't ask aloud. You've learned not to ask things that don't want to be answered. The priest's shoulder twitches slightly. Maybe a shrug, maybe a spasm. You decide it's agreement. It's more comforting that way. Outside, a bell rings. Not the death bell. Not yet. Just the hour. But it sounds like morning anyway. Every sound does now. Even birdsong carries a kind of grief. Even laughter, when it happens, sounds a little afraid of itself. You sigh and shift your weight. The bench doesn't like that. It reminds you with a groan that nothing here is built for comfort. Your stomach growls, low and offended. You haven't eaten since yesterday's bread, which tasted like it remembered being warm once. You reach into your satchel and find a piece of dried fruit, or something that was fruit-shaped long ago. You chew it slowly. It tastes like dust and effort. You swallow anyway. Hunger has learned to make compromises. The priest stands. You don't. He walks back toward the altar and lights another candle. You try to feel moved. You manage tired instead. The flame flickers. You flicker. Everything flickers. You look up at the crucifix and wonder if anyone hanging there ever imagined it would end this way, in a room too cold for miracles and too warm for ghosts. The incense burns down in the corner. You watch the smoke curl into nothing. It dances for no one. You think about the woman who gave you a ribbon last week, said it was for protection. You tied it to your belt. It fell off somewhere between Hope and the second house with the rats. You didn't go back for it. Some losses are too small to mourn and too large to replace. The priest sits again, this time closer. His sleeve brushes yours, rough linen against rougher wool. It feels like permission. You don't say anything. He doesn't either. But the silence feels less like an absence now and more like a thread holding two things together. Weak, yes, but not broken. Your knees ache when you rise. The stone floor has never been generous. You nod to the priest. He nods back, or maybe blinks. It's hard to tell. You don't linger. The door doesn't resist this time. It lets you leave without comment. Outside, the wind greets you like a disappointed aunt, cold and vaguely judgmental. You pull your cloak tighter and begin the slow walk back. The street is quieter than it should be. That's worse than noise. Noise means life. Silence means something else entirely. You keep your eyes on the ground, watching your boots press shapes into the mud. Each step a small defiance. Each footprint a tiny sermon in survival. Behind you, the chapel fades into the mist. The candles flicker behind the stained glass. You carry their glow with you for exactly 3 steps before the wind takes it away. And ahead, somewhere not far enough away, the cart will roll again. The chapel's silence still clings to you as you close the crooked gate behind you, its hinges offering a reluctant groan like a tired blessing. Incense has woven itself into your skin, into the folds of your clothes, into the seams of your thoughts. You had hoped for a sermon, or at least a muttered assurance. But the priest had only looked at you with the eyes of someone who had stopped pretending to know what faith means in a town that smells like rot. You had sat quietly on the edge of a pew, inhaling the dusty perfume of burnt wax and surrender, watching sunlight fight its way through the high, gray-streaked glass. And then you left, because even in a sacred place, the scent of sickness was never far behind. Now it's night again, not the comforting kind, but the type that crawls beneath your fingernails. You return to the bare space you dare call yours, past the alley with the collapsed roof and the empty hovel where someone coughed their last, and no one bothered to remove the door. It still stands, swinging gently in the wind, like a shrug from the world itself. The cold follows you inside, a wet, lingering thing that does not knock, does not wait, simply sits in your bedding before you do. You've tried warming your cot with a brick once heated in the hearth, but the brick split last week. You haven't replaced it. The mattress, if it deserves the title, is more a depression in a pile of straw than anything else. Straw that crunches and whispers when you shift your weight. Straw that has memorized your shape and your size. Somewhere in it lives a small colony of something that bites. You've stopped investigating. Tonight, you peel off your boots with a sound like someone tearing parchment in half, the leather stiff with dried mud and something darker. Your feet throb instantly with the kind of ache that seems to echo inside your bones, as if even your skeleton is disapproving of your choices. There's a bowl in the corner with a puddle of water that might have been clean at some point during the last rain. You dip a finger into it, then pull back. It's colder than the air, if that's possible. You dab some on your temples anyway, because that's what people say helps with tension. All it gives you is a fresh chill and a reminder that sometimes old advice is just the echo of someone else's desperation. The robe you use as a night covering smells faintly of vinegar and despair. You wrap it around yourself like a poor excuse for hope, tugging it tight as if fabric could shield you from the way the wind sneaks through the walls. The fire is gone, reduced to a few sullen embers pretending not to notice you. You nudge them with a stick, but they do not flare. They only glow with a dull resentment that mirrors your own. You lie down knowing it's mostly ceremonial. The act of lowering yourself onto the straw-stuffed pallet feels like a theatrical bow to a performance no one wants to attend. Your joints creak in protest. Your spine folds like damp parchment, and the straw shifts underneath you. Not as a support, but as a chorus of disapproval. The blanket, which you're fairly sure used to be a horse rug, smells faintly of hoof and desperation. It clings to you like guilt, or mildew, possibly both. Above you, the rafters groan like old men muttering in a language no one understands anymore. Every gust of wind stirs the shadows, making you wonder just how secure your roof is, and whether that patch of thatch that's been drooping all week is waiting for a moment like this, to give in, finally, with a damp plop to the face. You consider shifting slightly to the left, away from the anticipated impact zone, but decide against it. Movement is a risk. You've already curled yourself into the most tolerable coil your body will allow, and adjusting would mean renegotiating every ache. You stay still, trusting that if the roof caves in, at least you'll have a story. Or someone else will. You won't be awake to hear it. The silence isn't silent, of course. It never is. There's the soft shuffle of rats somewhere behind the wattle wall, the muted clink of something metallic left too close to the hearth, and the dry, whispering rasp of your own breath, echoing oddly beneath the beaked mask still perched beside you. It stares back like a sleeping predator, curved and unreadable, a face you wear by daylight, but dare not touch after dusk. It has soaked up every hour of fear, sweat, and time-scented failure you've worn all day, and now it sits vigil beside your bed like a poorly taxidermied omen. You wonder if it too dreams. The real problem is your own mind. It will not soften. It will not go still. The mattress could be spun from clouds, and the night air could hum lullabies, and still your thoughts would crawl like lice from one memory to the next. A child's cough, a mother's glazed stare, the way the blood looked as it slid down the edge of a wooden table. You don't even remember whose. Your mind plays these images not like paintings, but like smells, sudden, pungent, and inescapable. They find you here, in the crook of your own elbow, in the warmth of your knees pulled up close, in the spot where your chest lifts just slightly too fast with every breath. You've done your best, and it is not enough. That is what your mind keeps repeating, like a chant, like a prayer gone sour. You shift again. The mattress crackles in protest. So do your knees. Outside, the wind changes direction and something knocks against the door. A branch, a bucket, a ghost. You assign it no name and pull the scratchy blanket higher. It does not comfort. It merely rearranges the chill. And so you stay like this, half twisted, half awake, and fully convinced that sleep is less a biological need and more a rumor people pass around to feel superior. The floor beneath your straw mattress is not flat. It never was. It dips slightly to the left, which is probably why your shoulder is slowly sinking into oblivion, while your hip is doing its best impression of a church bell, rigid, ringing, and out of tune with the rest of your body. You attempt a minor adjustment, a heroic tilt, just enough to even things out. The result is a cascade of straw poking new places, a fresh pocket of cold air slinking in under the blanket, and the slow, rising certainty that your toes have gone entirely rogue. They are numb, they are damp, and they are no longer on speaking terms with the rest of your foot. Across the room, someone snores. Not a deep, peaceful snore, but the kind of ragged throat noise that suggests imminent suffocation or a dying goose. You consider throwing something, but you don't have the energy or the accuracy. Instead, you press your index finger against your temple and imagine peace. This fails. You then imagine punching your fellow sleeper with a loaf of yesterday's bread. This succeeds, temporarily, in producing a warm flicker of amusement. But the snoring continues. You shift again, this time with the finesse of a man trying not to wake the lice. Your knee knocks into something. A bowl, a boot, possibly a rat that's learned stillness as a defensive maneuver. Either way, it doesn't move, and neither do you. Any further. You've hit your nightly limit for spatial negotiation. You settle back into the unkind embrace of your straw mound, staring at the low ceiling, watching it not for comfort, but for leaks. There's a hole up there. You discovered it weeks ago, a little round peephole to the stars, though tonight it offers no view, just a flutter of damp wind and the occasional drip, which lands suspiciously close to where your ankle used to have feeling. You remember once thinking about patching that hole. You even found a scrap of hide that would have covered it nicely, but the hide became a bandage, and the hole remained. Like so many things in your life these days, it's just easier to live around the damage than to fix it. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls. Not the church bell this time. Something smaller, faint, hollow. It could be a wind chime made of bones or the last breath of a long-forgotten saint echoing from beneath the cobbles. You don't investigate. If death is walking tonight, it will find you easily enough. There's no need to stand and wave. Your eyes do not close so much as flutter with resignation. You pretend, for the 5th or 6th time, that you're drifting. You even match your breathing to the rhythm of someone who has already arrived at sleep. But your mind is a traitor. It tugs at every string. Did you remember to boil the water for that poultice? Did you mislabel the jar of dried sage? Or was it comfrey? Was that patient's rash? Spreading? You do not want the answers. You only want 1 minute, just 1 minute, of warmth, stillness, and silence that doesn't feel like holding your breath inside a coffin. But the world has other plans. The thatch above shifts again. Something scurries across a beam, and your fellow sleeper lets out a snort that startles even themselves. The room jerks back into motion like a reluctant donkey being kicked into a trot. Sleep is no longer a destination. It is a superstition. And so, you lie in the half-light, limbs twisted and unsatisfied, the scent of ashes in your nose and a growing ache behind your eyes. The fire has died. The air has gone still. And your final thought before dawn is not a wish, not a hope, not even a prayer, but a quiet resignation that sleep, like most comforts, is a thing you simply no longer expect. The light does not arrive. It seeps, slow and gray, like regret poured over stone. The floor creaks beneath you as you shift your weight, trying to ease the ache in your knees from the too low stool, the one that always tips slightly left, no matter how often you wedge it with splinters. There's a moment, soft, hovering between late afternoon and reluctant twilight, when the air in your lungs turns cold before you realize it, and the grime in your pores feels sharper, heavier. The cough you've ignored all day finally rasps out, a dry complaint rising from somewhere between your ribs and your regrets. Your hands rest in your lap, stiff with the cold and the sort of uselessness that accumulates after a long, empty day. It's then, as the world starts to dim and smells begin to deepen, that your thoughts begin to drift to the most forbidden luxury of all, clean water. Not the water from the wooden bucket beside the door, which smells faintly of turnip peel and desperation. Not the rainwater that filters through the soot-dark roof, dripping in angry intervals into the iron pot that's never quite dry. You dream, if such a word can survive in a plague year, of water so clear it doesn't smell, doesn't sting, doesn't coat your tongue with a memory of something long dead upstream. You remember it from some life that doesn't feel like your own. You sit very still, your shoulders hunched forward like the damp wool coat you've never managed to fully dry. Your mask, beaked, heavy, and now crusted along the edge with the dried sweat of too many yesterday mornings, hangs nearby, a silent promise that tomorrow will be no different. But for now, just for a breath or two, you're thinking about water that feels like silk on your face. The fantasy comes in vivid pieces. A stream, not thick with runoff, but light and rippling. The kind that would glisten in stories told by the rich who never had to worry about dysentery or boiling their breakfast. You imagine bending to it, cupping it in cracked palms, watching it shimmer through your fingers without the scent of rot or soap or someone else's fear. You shift again, and the wooden slat beneath you complains. The sound is sharp, and it pulls you back to the present where the water you do have is in a basin somewhere near your feet. You haven't used it in hours. Maybe it's frozen by now, thin-skinned ice forming like a judgment. You'd check, but there's no point. You already know the answer. Your mouth is dry in that special way that comes from breathing through layers of linen for hours on end. It's the sort of dryness that makes your tongue feel too large, like it's swollen with secrets. There's a mug nearby, ceramic, chipped, untrustworthy. Inside is water you meant to drink this morning but forgot. You lift it slowly, knowing before you do that it will taste like yesterday's air, metallic, slightly smoky, and entirely disappointing. It isn't just thirst. It's the memory of not needing to think about it, of water that arrived without ceremony, without risk. You long for the days before you measured how clean something was by how many times it didn't make you sick. But longing is expensive, and the currency is energy you don't have. Outside, someone is shouting. Someone is always shouting. It could be a neighbor berating a goat again, or someone discovering a family member no longer breathing. The sound is the same either way, sharp, desperate, exhausted. You do not go to the window. You already know what's there. Your boots rest near the fireless hearth, flopped like dead animals, caked in yesterday's streets. The smell of them is a reminder of the mud you tracked in, if it was mud. You scrubbed them half-heartedly with the same water you used to rinse your hands, and the water turned a sullen brown before vanishing into the cracks between the stones. Cleanliness is less a goal now than a hierarchy of filth. At some point, someone enters the room, but they don't speak. They don't need to. Their presence is felt in the increase of breath, the gentle puff of wool, the scuff of soles on packed earth. It could be the apprentice or the neighbor who trades stale bread for a look at his boils. You don't lift your head. Whoever it is won't offer you clean water. That's not how the world works anymore. There's a small cloth on the table, coarse, damp, and slightly moldy. You use it to wipe your face, not because it helps, but because it's something to do. The coldness of it is a small mercy. You press it to your eyes, and for a fleeting moment, imagine it's soaked in a river you've never seen. The fabric leaves behind a faint sourness. You pretend it's lemon. A faint scratch at the door. You don't move. There are many kinds of knocks now. The urgent, the fearful, the resigned. This one sounds like someone hoping you're not home. You sit very still, willing them to go away, and eventually, they do. You listen as their footsteps squelch away through the sludge of the road. You begin to drift, not toward sleep, but into that in-between where your body forgets to complain for a while. In that space, water is a smooth ribbon, slipping down your throat, across your chest, into your bones. It washes the soot from your lungs, the weight from your spine, the questions from your mind. In this quiet illusion, it is always spring, and your hands are never dirty. But the fire doesn't light itself, and no one is coming to stoke it. Eventually the chill creeps in again, wrapping itself around your ankles first, then your back, then your neck. You shake it off, not with movement, but with stubbornness. Warmth is not expected. It's negotiated. And still, despite everything, the thought of that imagined water, cold, clean, kind, lingers behind your eyes. It's not a wish. Wishes have more structure. It's more of an ache, a memory of a sensation you never properly had. The basin in the corner cracks a little as the ice thickens. A single drip echoes from the rafters, falling into the silence like punctuation in an unfinished sentence. You don't flinch. The sound is familiar, reassuring even. Perhaps tomorrow, if you're brave, you'll boil water twice. Once to drink. Once just to remember what steam smells like. You'll imagine it's a luxury. And in this world, it is. But for now, the air thickens, and your limbs begin to stiffen again. You lean back slowly against the wall, ignoring the itch at the base of your skull, the stiffness in your jaw, the ever-present scent of something that might once have been alive. In the distance, a bell tolls. Not for you. Not yet. And somewhere, not far from the basin, the drip repeats itself. Software predictable, inevitable. The chapter ends here, but the smell of the next place waits just beyond the door. It's somewhere between noon and nothingness, when the weight of your own presence begins to assert itself, not as a thought, not as a feeling, but as a scent. Faint at first, like damp wool on a forgotten floor, then sharper, more persistent, like boiled cabbage left too long near a fire. It trails behind you when you move. It clings to your gloves. It lives under the beak. And while the plague may be invisible, your contribution to the local olfactory landscape is not. You've become a walking memory of yourself. Your robes, once black and billowing, or at least trying to be, now move like wet curtains, heavy, stiff with yesterday's sweat and the collective despair of at least 4 households. There's a crust to the sleeves, a stiffness that wasn't there this morning. Your gloves creak when you flex your fingers, and you can't quite tell if that's the leather protesting or something organic trapped beneath. Something that used to be someone, perhaps. You stopped checking a while ago. Denial is a scentless comfort. The streets have not improved. The mud has taken on a new personality, greasier, slicker, as if it has learned sarcasm. It swallows your boots with each step and gurgles when you withdraw them, like it resents your interruption. You keep your gaze low, partly to avoid eye contact with those who still have eyes, and partly to monitor where your feet will next be insulted. A dead rat lies like punctuation at the edge of a puddle. You step around it without ceremony. Your beak, that awkward monument to pseudoscience and wishful thinking, has become a humid greenhouse of regret. The herbs inside, mint, rosemary, something else unidentifiable but allegedly helpful, have long since surrendered. They now smell like sadness and vinegar. Breathing through the beak is like inhaling through a compost heap wearing a wreath. And yet, removing it feels more horrifying than keeping it on. Naked, vulnerable, exposed. You keep it on. You are your own terrarium now. A neighbor you've passed before, the one who always coughs theatrically when you're near, gives you an extra wide berth. She does not hide her expression. Disgust, fear, and possibly pity all pass across her face like changing weather. It's not personal. You simply remind her of what no one wants to admit. This isn't ending. And neither are you. At least not today. You nod politely. She doesn't return the gesture. Back at your door, wood swollen from recent rains, latch rusted into reluctance. You pause before entering. Not because of any sacred ritual, but because you can smell yourself more clearly here. It hits you harder in enclosed spaces. The layers of wool, waxed linen, leather, and sorrow, each trapping molecules of failure and fermentation. You wonder if this is how a cheese feels when it realizes it's gone too far. Inside, the fire is out again. No one relit it after you left. No one relit anything. The hearth is just a hole now, framed by soot and ambition. You lean over it briefly, your joints complaining, and pretend there's warmth coming from the last ember. You imagine its glow. It's enough to fake the memory of comfort. For about 4 seconds. Then your knees ache and you stand. Your hands find the water basin, cold as always. You splash some over your face, or rather the mask. Old habits. A meaningless gesture. The water runs down the beak and into the folds of your robe. Lovely. Now your chest is damp, and you smell even more like mildew's cousin. You make a mental note to not do that again. It joins a long list of similar notes, none of which you've ever read twice. There's no food waiting. You didn't expect any. Hunger has dulled into something else now. An ambient condition, like humidity or regret. You chew on a scrap of stale bread hidden in your sleeve, stored for emergencies that never quite declared themselves. It tastes like sleeve. The crust has the consistency of bark. Still, your jaw works through it dutifully. Fuel is fuel, even when it's morally ambiguous. You sit. The chair is uneven and wobbles slightly to the left, as if favoring a wounded leg. The smell of your own body wafts upward as you settle. There is no dignity in it. You do not try to move away from the scent anymore. It is your companion. It is the room now. Somewhere in the wall, something scratches. You hope it's a rat. The alternative is spiritual. The robe doesn't dry. It never does. It has absorbed too much life and death. It wears you now more than the other way around. You imagine what someone might say if they entered. Is something rotting? And you'd have to answer, just me. But no one enters. No one wants to. The tools of your trade, if you can call it that, are arranged on the table, or rather, they're stacked there, in a manner that implies neglect. A jar of leeches, lid slightly askew, a rusted blade, a stick you once used to poke at a corpse without getting too close. These are your instruments. You don't clean them anymore. What would be the point? Disease doesn't care, and neither do you. At this stage, infection feels like a gentle exit. A distant bell rings, not a church bell, but something smaller, more urgent. You suspect it means someone new has died, or is about to. You do not rush. There is no point. The dying do not schedule themselves for your convenience, but neither do they run away. You reapply your gloves. Damp. Of course. They stick slightly as they slide on, trapping yesterday's sweat and this morning's uncertainty. Your hands smell like boiled wool and abandonment. You tell yourself this is normal. You lie to yourself with ease now. Practice helps. Outside again. The air is no better, but at least it's moving. It carries your scent away from you, briefly. A mercy. You pass a child who stares openly. He doesn't cry, but he does step behind a barrel. His eyes remain visible. You nod. He does not nod back. His nose wrinkles. Down the road, a mule drops something unmentionable. You step over it automatically. Your boots are past caring, though. They've become more sponge than leather. Your left sock has folded inward, creating a pressure ridge you've learned to ignore. Pain has become more suggestion than alarm. By the time you reach the next house, the smell of yourself has returned. Stronger, perhaps, from the effort of walking. It mixes now with the scent of other things, rotting timber, damp cloth, cooked onions from a window too late to be serving food. You are a symphony of scents, none of them pleasant, all of them earned. You knock. The door creaks open. A face peers out, then vanishes. You are not comfort. You are obligation in human shape, a necessary horror. You step inside, ducking slightly. The ceiling is low. The air inside is thick, and warmer, and worse. And now you've added your own bouquet to the blend. There is a patient, or what remains of one. You approach. You perform your rites. You wave your tools like someone who knows what they're doing. You do not, but you look the part. And the robe helps. No one questions the robe. Back outside. Your shoulders sag. The sky, which had the decency to be gray earlier, is now considering drizzle. A light patter begins. It dampens your hood. It activates the smells trapped in your sleeves. You are now a walking marinade. You return home again. The fire is still out. The chair is still uneven. Your robe slaps wetly as you remove it. You smell like memory and mildew, like effort without outcome. You settle again. You breathe through the beak. You stare at the hearth. You are, undeniably, your own legacy now. A scent in the walls, a damp mark on the chair, a memory waiting to be forgotten. And just as your eyelids start to sag under the weight of another disappointing day, you hear a knock at the door. It's time again, because the dead don't wait. But neither does the living. Not that there's much difference anymore. And so, in the gloom of your ever-thickening scent, you rise. Faintly, slowly, the next chapter waits. With smaller footsteps and sharper stares, the sound of your boots dragging through slush is less a noise and more a rhythm now. A wet, sucking metronome that marks time not in seconds, but in trudges. You can tell it's past midday not by the position of the sun. It's shy today, buried behind a quilt of gray. But by the way your knees have started to stiffen from walking, and your mask has begun to smell faintly of yesterday's breath. which itself smelled of the day before. The path home, or what you optimistically refer to as home, winds through a part of the town that always feels slightly off. The buildings lean a little too much. The shutters hang loose like tired eyelids. There's an old woman who sits on the same stool, under the same cracked awning, doing the same thing every day, knitting something colorless and glaring. She doesn't speak. She doesn't blink much either. She watches. Today, she's joined by a chorus you didn't ask for. It begins as a rustle behind a wall, a whisper, a giggle. Then, the unmistakable sound of children trying not to be seen. The rhythm of your boots is joined by the rhythm of theirs. Bare feet pattering in alleyways, scampering along ledges, crunching lightly on gravel as if they think you can't hear. You do. You hear everything. Your whole body is an antenna for discomfort. Then it begins. A low voice, sing-song and mean, the kind that only children can manage with such efficiency. Beak-face doom, beak-face doom, he'll sniff your soul and seal your tomb. You close your eyes behind the mask and sigh, though sighing just fogs up the tiny portholes you peer through, so you immediately regret it. The chant continues, gathering reinforcements. High voices, low voices, an occasional enthusiastic goat bleat from somewhere off stage. It's not the first time. You've passed this street often enough to earn a reputation, and not a flattering one. Once, you heard a child tell his brother that if you make eye contact with the plague doctor, your cow will miscarry and your hair will fall out in alphabetical order. Another swore you didn't have eyes at all, just two black pits with spiders inside. You walk a little faster, not out of fear. No, you're long past the point of fearing children. You fear more abstract things now, like dying while itchy, or tripping in manure and being found that way. But children? Number. They're a kind of chaos you've already accepted. The problem isn't fear. The problem is what they make you feel. They make you feel seen. And you really, really didn't want to be. The beaked mask was supposed to shield you, not just from miasma and rotting breath, but from recognition. It was meant to erase your identity, make you into a symbol, ominous, yes, but anonymous. And yet somehow, these little gremlins have seen right through you. They've given you a name, the Beaked Doom. You try to remind yourself that you've seen worse nicknames. There was once a monk with halitosis so legendary they called him Brother Blightmouth. He didn't even work in medicine. You pass the edge of the square and feel the children watching from above. Rooftops, overhangs, wooden balconies nailed on at odd angles. Somewhere, someone drops a pebble that narrowly misses your shoulder. It's the size of an acorn, harmless really, but it carries intent. It lands with a spiteful little plink on the stones beside you. You do not look up. Looking up is admission. Looking up makes them real. You focus instead on the way your fingers feel inside your gloves. Damp, a bit sticky, possibly growing their own ecology. You try not to flex them too much, lest the leather tear. You passed a glove seller this morning, but gloves are a luxury now. Most things are. Clean socks, hot food, a bath where the water doesn't try to flee your presence. You think briefly of a child who stared at you this morning with something that might have been admiration, or maybe confusion, or indigestion. The line between emotions is thin when you're 6, and your diet is mostly porridge and fear. That child didn't chant, didn't point, just watched you walk past, eyes wide, as though trying to memorize the shape of you in case dreams needed a new monster. You imagine what you look like to them. A long silhouette, draped in layers of dark wool and stiff linen. A cane in one hand. A mask shaped like the bastard child of a bird and a nightmare. You'd be terrifying if you weren't also waddling slightly from a groin rash you dare not inspect. Dignity is hard to maintain when chafing is part of your gait. The chant begins again from behind a fence, just out of sight. Beak-faced doom, with breath of rot, he'll poke your boils, then take the lot. It's not particularly clever, but the rhythm's catchy. A small hand thrusts up from behind the fence, holding something round. You brace instinctively, but it's only a turnip. Bruised. Probably meant to be symbolic, but you're too tired to decode vegetable insults. You consider picking it up and pocketing it for lunch, but that would only encourage them. So you trudge on. The smell of your own sweat, now mingled with damp wool and herbal residue, forms a cloud around you that even the wind avoids. Somewhere behind you, the fence creaks and the whisper of laughter trails off. The children lose interest for now. You reach your door. The wood is warped. The handle is sticky. You're not sure from what. You open it with your sleeve anyway and step inside. The small room greets you with the familiar smell of mildew, old paper, and something sour that you suspect is your mattress. You close the door behind you, not too loudly, or the children will hear and resume their chorus. There is a small moment of silence. You remove the mask. Your face underneath is not much better than the one you wore. Damp, flattened, a little haunted. You rub your nose, which feels like it belongs to someone else. Your cheeks itch where the leather pressed too tightly. You have lines. From the strap. From time. From yesterday's choices. You remove the outer coat, which peels away like a layer of regret. It's heavier than it was this morning. You try not to think about what it absorbed during the day. You hang it near the fire, which isn't really a fire, just a few stubborn coals pretending to still be useful. You sit. Not because you're finished. Plague doctors are never finished. But because standing is a battle, and the chair, while rickety, has the kindness of not judging. Outside you hear the faint ring of a bell. Someone has died. Or someone has been told that someone has died. Or someone has guessed and rung the bell just in case. It's all a bit theatrical. You lean back, not enough to break the chair, just enough to let it creak in protest. Your knees crack in sympathy. You glance at the wall where someone, probably you, scribbled a list of things to do. It's in charcoal and mostly illegible. That feels accurate. You close your eyes and try not to think. Not about the child with the rash who wouldn't stop scratching. Not about the mother who wouldn't meet your eyes. Not about the man who screamed when you entered because he thought you were death. And certainly not about the chant. But it echoes anyway. Soft now. Distant. A lullaby composed by tiny monsters. Beak-faced doom. Beak-faced doom. You wonder, not for the first time, if they'll still chant after you're gone. If your absence will inspire silence. Or a statue. A very poorly sculpted one. Out of bread dough, probably. You shift on the chair and feel your bones complain. You smell like your own legacy, an odor of despair, effort, and boiled herbs. But there is some comfort here, in the stillness. The kind that arrives not with peace, but with exhaustion. A full kind of emptiness. Outside, the wind taps against the boards, soft as breath. And somewhere, just faintly, comes the sound of someone laughing. Probably a child. Probably about you. Probably fair. You don't rise to investigate. You just listen as the fire gives one final sigh and collapses into its own ashes. And somewhere beyond the shuttered window, the town readies for night, for fever, and for the next round of impossible questions that you, as always, will be expected to answer. With leeches. And a very serious nod. But not yet. Not while the room is this quiet, and the children are just shadows on rooftops. And the world, for one bearable moment, pauses to breathe. The air feels heavier today. Not just damp or cold or stuffed with whatever invisible things drift in from the latrines, but heavy in a way that sits on your shoulders, like a sack of wet ashes. You didn't even try to straighten your spine this morning. What's the point? You're hunched by habit now, like a walking apology in feathers and leather. The kind of posture that says, I didn't cause this, even if no one's asking, except they are, constantly, with their eyes. You move through the morning like a slow leak. Everything aches. Everything sticks. The mask traps a stale humidity that smells like a herbalist's pantry, mixed with your own breath, and the faint but unshakable odor of guilt. The herbs in your beak are supposed to purify, but nothing inside your mask feels purified. Just warm and sour and medicinal in the wrong way, like a cupboard that's gone off. You don't eat. There's something pretending to be food on a slab of bread back in the hovel you call home, but you can't bring yourself to chew it, let alone swallow. Your mouth tastes like boiled linen and old metal. You think of clean water for a moment and then chase the thought away, like a sin. Down the lane, a bell rings. Not the hopeful kind. It's the sort of bell that tolls at half speed and makes your ribs feel hollow. Funerals have a way of being both routine and entirely theatrical, especially when it's the wealthy. They're dead, but they demand an audience. The procession today is moving slowly, intentional, reverent, glacial. Velvet drapes, gold-threaded cloth, horses that look cleaner than you've ever been. You stop to watch, because pretending not to would somehow be more conspicuous. You're a blot on the scenery, a hooded silhouette that doesn't belong in the polished reflection of this grief parade. People avoid you, of course, but with precision now. Not random flinches or sudden crossings of the street. It's strategic. Like you're a crack in the floor they've memorized the location of. They don't look at you, but their necks stiffen when they pass. Their gazes float just above your shoulder, always a little too casual. The man in the box, you're told, died of something not plague, something expensive, possibly poetic. A condition with a name, unlike the ones that kill your regulars. Those people just stop. Their bodies seize or seep or shrivel, and you scribble something approximating a cause. Humors usually satisfies the paperwork. God's wrath is a bit much, but not entirely inaccurate. You weren't invited to this funeral. Of course not. But someone will still mention you. Behind the gauze and incense and practiced sobs, someone in expensive shoes will whisper, "The doctor came too late." That's how it always goes. You are never early. You are never useful. You are the punctuation mark at the end of a sentence nobody wanted to read in the first place. Children watch you from doorways, their faces half hidden in curtains that smell like mildew and secrets. One of them mimes your beak. Another holds their nose and laughs. You're a costume now, a walking bedtime threat. Finish your gruel, or the beaked doom will visit. You keep walking. What else is there? There's a bucket of leeches to check on when you get back. A bucket. You've named one of them. Not out of affection, but because naming it was less humiliating than admitting how often it's the only thing that reacts when you speak. It responds to warmth. You call that a friendship now. The alley near the fishmonger's house smells like brine and burned fat. A woman steps out of a doorway just as you pass, and for a second, you both freeze. You can see in her eyes that she recognizes you, not personally, but as a category. Her hand twitches, like she's considering a blessing, or a curse. In the end, she just spits on the ground. You nod. It's the closest thing to a conversation you've had today. Someone's been leaving little bundles on your doorstep. Offerings? Threats? Hard to say. One was a dead mouse with herbs tied to its legs. Another, a coin wrapped in string. Today, it's a stone with a hole worn clean through the middle. You keep them in a corner near the ashes. You don't question them anymore. They're probably safer than the actual treatments you've been told to use. Your boots are splitting again. The toe flaps like the mouth of someone trying to argue but too exhausted to finish. You patch them with string and a strip of linen from a shirt that once belonged to a man who no longer needs shirts. You've stopped distinguishing between clothing and supplies. If it can cover a wound or cushion a splinter, it's medicine now. Later, when the sun is doing that awful thing where it pretends to set but just hangs there like a yellow blister. You hear voices behind your shed. The nosy boy from 2 doors down is back there again, probably daring his friends to touch your tools. You make a noise, a low, throat-clearing warning sound, and the scattering of feet tells you they were closer than you thought. One of them leaves behind a wooden toy sword. You keep it, not for sentiment, but because it's straight enough to use as a tongue depressor. As evening bleeds in, the sky turning the color of rotting plums, the funeral bells have stopped, but their echo clings to your skull. You think about the man in the velvet-lined box and wonder how many names will be carved into his tomb. You think about your own name, which no one ever says, and how likely it is that you'll end up dumped in a pit with the others, mask and all. You reek, not just of sweat and leather and that strange blend of vinegar and regret that coats everything you own, but of repetition. Your stink is the product of routine. Layers of the same tasks, the same paths, the same despair. You could scrub yourself raw and still smell like failure. When you finally sit, your knees sigh like bellows. The fire doesn't want to stay lit tonight. You blow gently on the embers, your breath catching in the beak and condensing against the inside of the mask. You take it off, slowly, reverently, like peeling away your last defense. The air is cold and smells like wet soot. You try to savor it. A small, terrible luxury. Outside, the streets are quiet. No cartwheels, no bells, just the sound of something dripping nearby and the low moan of timber settling under the weight of winter's warning. You close your eyes and think of nothing. That, too, has become a skill. And somewhere beyond the walls of your hovel, someone coughs. A dry, rattling cough. The kind that insists. But that will be tomorrow's visit. For now, you rest your head against the wall, listening to it creak like an old confession, letting the silence bleed into your bones. Soon, it will be time for the tools again. But first, a moment. A breath. A pause in the middle of the plague. Because next, the tools will laugh at you. There's a moment, soft and sour, when you catch a whiff of yourself and genuinely wonder if that smell is coming from your mask or your soul. You've long since lost the line between the two. The beak, once ominous and noble, is now little more than a damp leather funnel collecting every bad decision you've sweated into it. Your breath rolls back at you in waves of onion, rot, and regret, like your face has been living inside a dying cupboard. And still, you strap it on again, the same way you've done every day, because it's what you're supposed to do. Because somehow, this terrible mask is supposed to protect you, or at least make people think you know what you're doing. Which is worse, really. The tools wait for you in their bundle. You keep them wrapped in a cloth that was once white and now resembles the general hue of old porridge and floor dust. They jangle with grim cheerfulness, each with its own unsettling personality. The scalpel is chip-toothed. The tweezers have a hinge that catches. The bleeding bowl has a suspicious dent that looks a little too much like a previous patient's desperate bite mark. You unroll the cloth like it's a magic carpet made of bad choices. There is no dignity in the way your fingers hover above them. You pick each one up, not because you trust it, but because it's the only one that hasn't rusted completely shut. The forceps mock you with a wobbly grip. The jar of leeches gives an audible plop as one throws itself against the glass in what can only be described as optimism. You stare at it for a moment too long, wondering who here is truly the parasite. You don't like the answer. The morning visit today is to someone's cousin's wife's sister who has a blackened tongue and itchy knees, which is vague enough to mean anything or nothing at all. You try to mentally prepare by refreshing your knowledge of the four humors, which by now have all blurred into one general idea, that everyone is out of balance, and it's your job to make them feel worse before they feel better. Assuming they live long enough for that second part, you trudge across the slush-smeared road, the mud sucking at your boots like it's trying to make a moral point. You step in something that smells like onions, but with notes of despair. A man walks by and crosses himself after looking you in the face. Well, the beak. The effect is the same. He mutters something about curses. You try not to take it personally, but your tools clink in your bag like a chorus of bad ideas agreeing with him. When you arrive at the house, it's exactly as you feared. Low ceiling, high humidity, and one bed for 5 people, 3 of whom are breathing too fast, 1 who's not breathing at all, and the 5th has already thrown up in your general direction. You bow slightly, because that's what you're meant to do, and set your bag down with a practiced theatricality, as if it doesn't contain a selection of medieval torture devices masquerading as medicine. You start with the leeches, because of course you do. You've tried explaining the reasoning before, that they draw out the bad blood, that they can ease the fever, that they are more reliable than most priests. But the truth is, you start with the leeches because you're tired. And applying a leech requires less emotional investment than telling someone they might not see next week. The leeches squirm excitedly, or maybe resentfully, as you ease them onto flesh that's already puckered with worry. You pretend not to notice when one falls off too soon. You replace it with a firmer press, whispering a little apology under your breath, not to the patient, but to the leech. At least it's doing what it was born to do. You're still not entirely sure what that is for you. You pull out your cauterizing iron, more out of obligation than necessity. It's a chunk of iron that you heat in a nearby fire until it glows like it's angry. And then, for reasons no one has fully explained, you touch it to someone's skin and hope that it scares the illness away. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it just adds one more scar to a body already in negotiation with death. You hold it in your glove, the heat humming through the leather. There's a moment where you almost feel powerful. Then you notice the iron's tip is bent, and it looks like it's smirking at you. The feeling passes. You apply it to the patient's ankle. Not because the ankle is the problem, but because it's the only part of them not covered in rash or vomit. There is a sound. It is not a scream exactly. It's more like a gasp with a purpose. You hold still. You wait. You nod solemnly. The room smells like burning meat and candle wax. Someone whispers a prayer. You think it's for you. Back at home, or what passes for home, which is more like a damp shelf with a straw mat and an angry cat that's decided you are the enemy. You clean your tools in a bowl of water that stopped being clean sometime around the last patient. You rinse, you wipe, you rub each one with a cloth and try not to think about the lives it has touched or ended. You tell yourself you're helping. You tell yourself that rust is part of the charm. You tell yourself that tomorrow you'll sharpen the blades and scrub the handles and boil the cloths. Tomorrow is always a better day for pretending things can improve. The tools, however, do not agree. The tweezers snap shut on your glove with malicious glee. The bleeding knife slips from your hand and lands hilt up, like a judgment. The leech jar makes a wet slosh and then goes still. You stare at them all and realize they've become something more than objects. They are companions now, silent, unforgiving, loyal only in the way that reminders are. You think about the physician who trained you, the one who said your instruments were an extension of your body. You're beginning to worry that means you are, quite literally, falling apart. You reach for the mirror. There isn't one, of course. Only a piece of tin polished just enough to reflect your outline. You catch a glimpse of your beaked mask and wonder when it stopped being costume and started being skin. You peel it off slowly, feeling the dampness cling to your cheeks, the straps tugging at hair that's long since given up. Underneath, your face is pale and pocked with the indentations of straps, like a mask you never took off fully. Your eyes look tired. Your mouth looks like it hasn't said anything kind in days. You look exactly like someone who talks to their tools and expects them to listen. You lie down. not to sleep. You don't sleep anymore. Not really. You rest. You breathe. You listen to the rain hit the roof and imagine each drop is a voice, whispering some grim truth you've tried to forget. The beak sits beside you, watching. The leech jar gurgles quietly. One of them climbs up the side and slides down again, like it's trying to escape and has bad knees. You think of the rich families in town, how their doctors wear silk and drink wine and pronounce things in Latin while holding silver instruments that never touch anything unpleasant. You think of how they're remembered in stone, while you will be remembered only by stain and scent. You close your eyes and try to hear nothing, but the tools are still laughing. And somehow, you know they always will. And tomorrow, they'll come with you again, even if you don't want them to, even if they're the only ones left. Even if, deep down, they're the only part of this whole farce that still believes in you. Just a little. And somewhere in the darkness, you swear you hear the faint wheeze of a child calling you the beaked doom, and you're too tired to even argue, so you let the name stay, heavy and warm, like a second skin. The day does not begin. It simply continues, like an ache that rolls across time without end or beginning, only dullness and weight. There is no sun today, just a smear of gray pressing down from above, like wet wool draped over your thoughts. You're not sure if it's morning or afternoon. You're not sure if it matters. The fog has settled not only in the streets, but somewhere deeper, in the spaces behind your eyes, in the corners of your breath. Your legs are leaden, and your joints speak in the language of old wood, creaking, tight, and mildly resentful. You try to stand, then try again, and when you finally rise, you discover that your head has chosen today to exist as a separate, pulsing entity. It feels like it's filled with soup, not the hot, comforting kind. No, more like a room-temperature porridge left out too long. The kind that should have been eaten yesterday. The kind that, if you're being honest, you probably still would eat today if someone handed it to you. The mask feels heavier than usual. Perhaps the strap has sunk deeper into your hair overnight. Perhaps your hair is simply too tired to hold it up. The beak droops. You know this because the old woman in the alley squinted at you like you were a wilting turnip and muttered something about divine punishment. That was before she spat in your direction. Not maliciously, just customarily. You shuffle toward the edge of town, your feet leaving sluggish trails in the mud that refuses to dry, as if the very earth itself has decided that this is the mood now. Wet, gritty, unsure whether it's alive. You pass a child playing with a stick, or perhaps it's not a game at all, just an investigation into whether the stick will sink deeper into the puddle than the one before. You nod at him. He does not nod back. He stares, wide-eyed, like he's trying to remember your shape for a nightmare later. You reach the next house on your list, or what passes for a list, scribbled on a scrap of waxy parchment you've rewritten too many times. You knock on the door, and the knock sounds pathetic. Not because you're weak, though you are, but because the door is soft, as if it's absorbing your effort. Everything is soft now, even the walls, even the air. You begin to suspect that you, too, have started to soften. You used to feel solid, at least. Now you feel like bread left in a basin. Inside, a woman tells you her husband has the marks. You nod solemnly and gesture toward your satchel, as if it contains hope. What it actually contains is a wax-stoppered bottle of something that might be vinegar, a rusted set of clamps, 3 leeches of questionable mood, and a prayer someone muttered into a rag and gave you weeks ago. You haven't had the heart to throw it away. It smells like cloves and desperation. The husband is gray in patches. His skin has forgotten its instructions. You look at the marks, swollen, dark, clustered like angry grapes along the thigh, and you make a noise that suggests professional concern. Internally, you're thinking of potatoes, because that's what his leg looks like now. Overboiled, bruised, slightly too wet. You reach for a leech. It does not reach for you. You shake the jar. It sighs. That might be your imagination, but you're fairly certain the leeches are beginning to unionize against you. You apply 2 of them to the patient's arm, murmuring something meant to sound reassuring, but your voice is caught somewhere between a croak and a whisper through wool. The 3rd leech refuses outright. You do not blame it. If given the choice, you wouldn't touch this arm either. You wait. Blood is drawn, or oozed, or encouraged. Time passes, or it doesn't. The smell of sickness curls up your nostrils and clings behind your eyes. You wonder when you last tasted air that wasn't slightly sweet with rot. When you remove the leeches, one is swollen, the other is missing. You do not search for it. You don't have the energy to care if it escaped. Maybe it had the right idea. You nod to the wife. She nods back. You both pretend something helpful happened. You leave her a scrap of cloth soaked in the maybe vinegar and instruct her to wave it around when the fever spikes. She asks how high the fever should get before it's worrying. You respond, "It already is," and leave before the weight of that answer collapses in the room behind you. Outside, the sky has not changed, but your bones have. They feel looser now, like your skeleton is slowly negotiating an exit. You trudge toward the next hovel. You pause halfway and sit on a stump that was once a bench, that was once part of a fence. You breathe. The air doesn't want you to. There is a burning behind your eyes now. Not from grief or tears, you're far past those. This is from the air, or the lack of it, or perhaps from the memory of a time when lungs didn't hurt just from being awake. You take off your gloves and stare at your hands. They look old. They feel old, like they've been here longer than you have. One nail is cracked. A blister stares up at you with suspicion. You run a finger along the edge of your beak, tracing the same line you traced yesterday. You don't remember why you started doing that, only that you haven't stopped. You're supposed to keep moving. There are houses that still believe in your presence. There are people who think your mask means knowledge. Your tools mean safety. You've said balance the humors more times than you can count. You're no longer sure what the humors are, only that they're very out of balance and probably giggling behind your back. A cough escapes you, dry at first, then less so. It echoes oddly in your mask, like a promise made to the wrong god. You freeze. You try again. It doesn't go away. You lean forward, elbows on knees, trying not to think about the sharpness in your ribs. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just exhaustion. Maybe it's the air. Maybe it's the sadness. Because sadness, you've learned, is sticky. It lives in the folds of your coat. It lingers in the corners of rooms where no one sits anymore. It follows you like an apprentice, quiet and mostly useless, but always watching. And on days like this, soft and gray and endless, it crawls into your spine and sets up shop. You close your eyes, only for a moment, only long enough to remember the color of something that wasn't gray. It takes you a while. Eventually, you settle on onions, not because they're bright, but because they burn, because they make you cry, because even their memory has flavor. When you finally stand, your knees complain in a dialect of misery you've grown fluent in. You adjust the mask. You adjust the weight of your satchel. You adjust nothing at all. You move toward the next door, the next face, the next case. You are not sure if you are still healing people, or harming them, or simply delaying the inevitable while pretending that you aren't carrying it with you. You cough again. It's quieter this time. You pretend not to notice the fleck of red. You keep walking. And behind you, somewhere deep in the folds of your coat, something begins to settle in. Perhaps it is the plague. Perhaps it is sadness. You're no longer sure they are different things. You turn the corner, and the street ahead is empty. Quiet. Software. Like a mouth closed tightly around a secret. You step forward anyway, and in the distance, where the wind sighs low and hopeless through the bones of the city, there is the faint promise of tomorrow, or something like it. Something that sounds just enough like a breath to follow. You're still walking, though your feet no longer bother to tell you where they're going. The ground feels the same everywhere now, mud smeared with older mud, coated in a polite sheen of filth that has learned to settle politely over cobblestones, wood, grass, and sometimes people. The weight of your mask tugs on your skull like an anchor made of leather and gilt. You'd take it off if you remembered how to want things. The beak is still stuffed with herbs, but they've grown stale. At first, there was mint and wormwood, lavender if you were lucky. Now, they smell like disappointment and mouse droppings. You once refreshed them weekly, then monthly. At some point, you stopped checking. You can still smell through the beak now, which means it has failed at its only job, much like you. Your hands no longer feel like hands. They are extensions of a profession you didn't choose, wrapped in cloth, cracking beneath it. When you move your fingers, they whisper secrets to your joints. Little snaps, subtle crunches, betrayals of the flesh. You keep them inside your sleeves whenever possible because you're tired of recognizing them. They've grown thin, familiar, almost skeletal. You stop near the market, though nothing is sold here anymore. The stalls are empty, their fabric roofs sagging like tired lungs. A single apple sits on a barrel, browning and alone, surrounded by a halo of flies who have grown territorial and suspicious. You don't remember the last time you ate something that hadn't been boiled into apology. The sky above is pale and flat, like unpainted canvas stretched too tight. The kind of sky that makes your thoughts feel like echoes. A sky that doesn't answer back when you stare at it for too long. You try to remember what day it is. Not because it matters, but because the calendar in your head still wants to believe in structure. It's probably Saint Somebody's Day, which means you should have lit a candle, muttered a prayer, maybe applied a salve to someone's forehead and pretended to believe in it. But you didn't. You forgot, or remembered and decided against it. You can't recall which. The last patient you saw looked at you like they recognized something you didn't. They didn't ask for a cure. They asked for quiet, and you gave it to them. You sat by their side for a while, breathing through your beak and trying not to sound too alive. They stopped breathing sometime during that sitting. You don't know when. You think you might have the plague, or sadness, possibly both. The fever has stopped bothering to climb. It just sits there now, behind your eyes, warm and patient, like a cat on your chest that you can't move without coughing. You don't check your pulse anymore. You stopped counting because the numbers didn't make you feel better. Now you just wait for the dizziness to decide whether it wants to pass. Your neighbor hasn't knocked in days, the grumpy one with the limp and the breath like burnt onions. You used to pretend to dread her visits, but now her absence feels louder than her footsteps ever did. Maybe she passed. Maybe she moved. Maybe she's still alive and decided that you're not worth interrupting anymore. The streets grow quieter each day. Less crying, less shouting. Even the moaning has diminished, which sounds like mercy, but feels like silence settling over a battlefield. The children don't play anymore. Not even the one who used to throw rocks at your back and call you names he only half understood. You never caught his name, but you miss the sound of his voice, shrill and bright like a cracked bell. You try to sleep some nights, but sleep doesn't arrive. It tiptoes past your bed like it's avoiding eye contact. When it does come, it comes in pieces, scattered like grain spilled on a stone floor. Just enough to tempt you, never enough to nourish. Your dreams have stopped trying to be comforting. Last night, you dreamt of clean water, clear, cold, and singing in a cup. You cried when you woke, just a little. Your cot is beginning to collapse. The straw inside it has formed itself into judgmental ridges, each one plotting against your spine in slow revenge. The blanket smells like you, which is to say, like something that once was human and now is mostly wool and regret. The walls leak, the ceiling groans, and you still hang your coat by the door as if you're going to need it again tomorrow. You're not sure who will find you when it happens. Probably no one. That's the strange comfort of it. You've become invisible in your beak, a walking shadow no one wants to touch. Even your fellow doctors don't make eye contact anymore. They pass you on the street with nods that feel like condolences, or maybe accusations. You still carry your tools, out of habit mostly. The wooden stick for distance, the rag for emergencies, the pouch of powders that smell like someone else's bad ideas. You haven't opened it in days, maybe weeks. It doesn't matter. You no longer believe in their purpose. You're not sure you believe in anything except damp socks and the inevitability of disappointment. This morning, you sat by your window and watched a dog carry a bone down the street. Not a metaphorical one, a literal femur, probably human. The dog looked proud, purposeful, and alive. You envied it. You almost called out, but your voice caught in your throat and turned into a cough that rattled something inside you. You sit now more than you walk. You stare more than you speak. You exist like steam, there, then gone, then there again, but thinner, less whole. Eventually, when the breath gets shallower and the heat behind your eyes turns into pressure in your chest, you lie down. You do not make a scene of it. You don't think about legacy or records. You do not expect a eulogy or even a comment. You simply fold yourself into your corner of the room and wait. You keep the mask on. It feels wrong to take it off. You've worn it longer than your own skin now. It has shaped your thoughts, your posture, your silence. It has become your only company. You lie on your side, facing the wall, and the beak presses gently into the floorboards, as if listening for one last confession. At some point, the coughing stops. The thoughts slow. The fever becomes background hum. You are neither afraid nor relieved. You are gone slightly, and then more. You do not dream again. The room settles. Dust drifts. Outside, a cart passes, and no one looks toward your door. The wind rustles the corner of your curtain, and then forgets to do it again. Days pass. Eventually, someone opens the door. They see the shape of you still, hunched and dressed and proper. Still masked, still formal. They do not remove it. They wrap you as you are, like a parcel, like an inconvenience. You are buried in a shallow grave at the edge of the churchyard, among the others who were useful until they weren't. They do not name you. They do not need to. Your mask is the marker. Your absence is the rest. And in that cold, damp silence beneath the earth, you no longer worry about fevers or coughs or tomorrow. You simply lie there, undisturbed, waiting for the weight of time to settle completely. And somewhere, just above where the roots begin to wander, someone else reaches for the beak, brushes it clean, and pulls it over their face. Because there's always another mask, and always someone else just foolish enough to wear it.